Robservations with Robert, Meyer, Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your evangelist of the imagination, and still undefined, your existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I am robcasting at you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek singularity. This is Robservations, the show about something, episode 727. Now, as many of you know, one of the reasons for this channel to exist is to offer, for me to opine about the entertainment business, the making of movies and television specifically, things that I've worked in, and I feel I have some insight, so I feel I'm okay to opine about these things. And of course, you've heard me say a million times on this channel, say it with me now. You don't get what you deserve. You get what you negotiate. And to quote the great Bob Sugar from Cameron Crowe's script from Jerry Maguire, it ain't show friends, it's show business. And we have had a graphic depiction of both of those sentiments drop today. First of all, I wanted to put you all in the Wayback Machine, and I wanted to talk about how talent gets paid in the entertainment business. And I want to take you all the way back to the summer of 1989. Now, I looked up, there's a lot of articles that cite this you can find on the internet. I couldn't find anything that was definitive, but I'm just going to, so take what I'm about to say with a grain of salt, but it is from my collective memory. Yes, I can be suffering from the Mandela effect or whatever, but so I'm going to go back to Tim Burton's Batman. And the conventional wisdom is, and what was said at the time and what has still been written about over the last 32 years, is that Jack Nicholson, when he made his deal to play the Joker, he apparently took less money up front to play the Joker for instead a piece of the back end. Now, as we all know, if you go back and look at the Art Buchwald Coming to America case that Paramount hard fought but hard lost case about how people get paid in the entertainment business, you've heard of studio accounting. Movie studios, they're never going to play on the up and up in terms of how much money they make, because there's just all kinds of crazy accounting shenanigans. They are loath to let go of their cash, especially to the talented people who create the very things that they sell. But so Jack Nicholson cut himself a sweet deal. Now, Batman, Tim Burton's Batman, was a monster success in the summer of 1989. And Jack Nicholson made a deal where he got a piece of the back end. He carved himself out a very nice piece of the back end, not net profits, probably part of a first dollar gross, which means first dollar is however much money the movie's making. You get a piece of that. You don't have to wait until everyone gets paid to see what's left, and that's the profit. No. You get a first dollar gross deal. And the way I remembered it, and again, take this with a grain of salt, this is not factual information. This is my remembering something from 32 years ago. But basically, he made $60 million. That's, I think, what was said. That was the number. $60 million. And at the time, this was an enormous amount of money to make, for an actor to make with movies. Now, as we moved into the 90s, actors, partly because of Jack Nicholson, and it was felt that part of the reason Batman was as successful as it was because Jack Nicholson was in it. And within the 90s, during the 90s, the salaries for quote-unquote movie stars exploded. But the problem with that is that sometimes stars, while they might work in one movie, didn't work as well in another movie. And again, if I'm misremembering this, you can come after me. But a movie like The Cable Guy, Jim Carrey was at the zenith of his career, and his agents and his managers, his lawyers, you get while the getting's good. Jimmy Fallon's character in Almost Famous, which, by the way, came out on 4K from Paramount. As an aside, Jimmy Fallon's character saying what you can, when you can, how you can. You get as much as you can when you can. So if somebody's going to pay you, I think it was Columbia, is going to pay Jim Carrey $20 million to go be in The Cable Guy, then you take it. What happened was, though, a lot of these films with these big ticket actors didn't perform that well, so they stopped paying actors that much money. Well, what you want to do then in that case is carve yourself out, if you're a big name, performance-based incentives. Many A-list directors, and maybe not so many A-list directors, but directors and top-of-the-line actors and talent, mostly the big creatives, get performance incentives, or what they call box office bumps. If a movie makes a certain amount of money, a director gets a certain amount of money as well, or an actor gets a certain amount of money. It's an incentive to do good work. And in my mind, that's the way people should be paid. Everybody should have a part of that. Now, I don't want to go down that road about who gets paid what and residuals and streaming and this, but how things have changed in the business. But streaming is a big part of that. And one of the things that streaming does is most of the time you get a buyout. The new model for if you're working in a streaming show or something is you don't get residuals. Because if you're in a big successful show like ER or Friends that becomes a monster hit all over the world, it goes into syndication. You could become very, 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 very wealthy, like Aaron Spelling wealthy, if you were on a hit show, because it gets resold over and over again all over the world. But then with movies, it's not so much. The box office of films, they can offer you performance-based bumps. So it's really important to get a deal that based on box office performance, you know that you're going to get a certain amount of money. And the Marvel Cinematic Universe franchise, I don't want to get into whether you like it or not, the Marvel Cinematic Universe franchise is the single most, okay, maybe, I don't know if it's not adjusted for inflation, but it's the single most financially successful franchise in Hollywood history. Before Black Widow came out, you had 23 movies. And if you go back and you average the box office of all 23 movies together, however much money they all made together, and you divide them by the number 23, each movie made in excess of $1 billion. Which means that all Marvel movies, they're assumed to make $1 billion because 23 movies, it bears that out. I mean, if you ever wanted something that was a surefire thing to bet on, it's Marvel. Now, of course, that doesn't take into account the pandemic, but still, Marvel movies, $1 billion times 23. In terms of precedent in Hollywood, it does not get much better. The biggest sure thing in the history of the entertainment business, in the history of all of Hollywood, is Marvel at the box office. Until Black Widow. So what has changed in the year 2021 is because of the pandemic and theaters were closed, the studios were faced with a tough choice. They had spent a lot of money making tentpole movies. And as I've talked about on this show, they don't just have vaults of money where they can just spend money of their own to make movies. They have to borrow it. They have financial partners. They might borrow it from banks. They have lines of credit, which means the interest starts ticking up, cutting into the profits, cutting into your quarterly earnings. All of those things play a part. So faced with the global pandemic in the year 2020, studios had spent lots of money on movies that were now just sitting on shelves. What were they going to do? Well, at the same time, you had the launch of various streaming services. Disney Plus had launched. You had HBO Max launching. Peacock was launching. Now we have Paramount Plus. But during the time of this pandemic, these brand new streaming services, all hoping to achieve what Netflix has achieved, were launched. But the difference is these streaming services were studio services. So Disney is really the repository of all of Disney's shows and movies. So if you want to go to Disney or see Disney movies, eventually everything that Disney has ever made that they have the rights to, like, I don't know if the original Mickey Mouse Club will ever be up there, if they ever sort that out, but I'm sure one day they will. Everything that Disney has ever made will eventually be up on Disney Plus. It'll be the repository if you want Disney, They used to re-release their movies every couple of years. Nope, everything's going to be on Disney Plus, and every person in the world who has kids is going to eventually get a Disney Plus subscription because everything you need as far as Disney is concerned is right there. So these new streaming services are very important, and they are also driving up stock prices because the success, more so than anything, a streaming service and the subscribers that you get every month is kind of a sure thing. You put a movie out like Jungle Cruise, they probably spent a lot of money on Jungle Cruise. They don't know how much money it's going to make, especially during a pandemic. But if you put out a movie on a streaming service, you can break out, you can snap off part of your monthly subscribers or amortize those costs and figure out how much is each movie worth based on the subscribers you have. So with something like Netflix, there's 200 million worldwide subscribers, which means, just for the sake of argument, if I don't even remember, is it $15 a month? Let's just say it is for the sake of argument. You have 200 million subscribers. You're looking at $3 billion a month. And then you can base your operating costs on that and how much you're going to spend on programming. So $3 billion, so what is that? That's $36 billion a year. You figure out, okay, we're going to spend however much money, say a third of that on programming to keep people or something. So having subscribers is a very stable way to tell your shareholders and whomever else, banks or whatever, this is our cash flow. And it's probably the most streaming services for the studios, especially Warner Brothers with HBO Max, becomes a very stabilizing force in terms of money because, it was a crapshoot before, but with streaming services, it sort of shores up how much money you make. So it's very important. But what happened with the pandemic is all of these movies that were greenlit and put into production before the pandemic, people signed contracts. They signed contracts. And as I always say, in Hollywood, it's not what you deserve, it's what you negotiate. Now, what started to happen, it really started with Warner Brothers when Jason Kilar took over, and other people at the studio suggested during the pandemic, well, we ought to figure out a way to make money or our interest payments are killing us and our movies are languishing away on shelves. They decided at Warner Brothers to do day-and-date releases. We're going to release our movies on HBO Max while we put them in the theaters. And they have had varying degrees of success. I'm surely not as much success as they wanted. I have HBO Max. By the way, I really love HBO Max as a streaming service. But when they put out like the new Denzel Washington, Rami Malek, Jared Leto movie, The Little Things, 3 Oscar winners in this movie, it didn't cause quite that much of a stir. John Lee Hancock directed the movie. He wrote it 30 years ago, a little bit of a throwback, whatever. So, not a huge success. But still, then they had Wonder Woman 84 that was also going to be released day and date. But Warner Brothers did something very interesting. Warner Brothers knew that the contracts that they had with Patty Jenkins, who'd made Wonder Woman 1, and they want to stay in good graces with Patty Jenkins, but most especially they want to stay in good graces with Gal Gadot. They paid both women $10 million each before the movie was going to come out because in their contracts it didn't say that they were going to release Wonder Woman 84 day and date on HBO Max, and nobody really knew how that was going to affect the global box office. But better to be safe than sorry. They went to those ladies, and apparently they went to other talent as well, and said, look, your movies with this day-and-date release, we don't understand what the model is going to be. We don't know how many people would watch on HBO Max as opposed to going to the theater during a global pandemic. We know it's going to affect it somehow. We want to stay in good graces with you, so here, have $10 million. Now, the thing was, there's a lot of other talent and a lot of other deals, but for the most part, I can report on Wonder Woman because that was widely reported. Cut to Black Widow. You would have thought that, so Black Widow is one of 4 Marvel movies, 3 of which are being released by Disney. Black Widow, Shang-Chi, and the Eternals. Don't forget that Spider-Man No Way Home, while in the MCU, is a Sony film. But anyway, so it's not going to immediately be on Disney Plus or anything like that. So of all these movies, Black Widow was supposed to come out first. Not a cheap movie to make. Disney's incurring interest charges because they borrow money to make these films. And what are you going to do? Or how are you going to release this movie? They keep pushing the release date. Well, they did. It came out, And as we all know, if you follow Hollywood, it made about $88 million or something, $80 million opening weekend. And at the same time, it made $60 million on Disney Plus. Because as you know, day and date release, and on Disney Plus, you pay an extra premium, $30. And you get it on Disney Plus. Now, the difference is the money that you make on Disney Plus, you don't have to split it with theaters. Like when a movie makes $100 million, depending on your split, a studio might take $60 million of that, and exhibitors will take home $40. But if you put it out day and date on Disney Plus, the studio gets to take a majority of that $60 million because it's just a premium fee, and they stream it. So they're cashing out. They're making a lot of money. So with that little bit of background, and by the way, this is going to be a long episode of Robservations because I have a lot of great letters, but I really want to examine this and what has happened here. Today, well, first of all, let me start with an article. So there's been a lot of and also I have to say, I haven't said this, Black Widow had the biggest drop off of any of any Marvel movie, I think in history, in its second weekend. Didn't have any staying power. So Black Widow is, no matter how you look at it, no matter how much money they made on Disney Plus, for Marvel and for Disney, very disappointing. Obviously, it hasn't opened in China yet. There's a lot of markets that it hasn't done business in yet, so it still stands to earn, but it has not fit the Marvel paradigm, not really. And everyone's Monday morning quarterbacking, and everyone's saying a bunch of shit about this. Anthony D'Alessandro, on July 27th at 5:13 in the afternoon on Deadline, had a brief article here. IMAX boss, because all the Marvel movies do well in IMAX, IMAX boss says cannibalization hurt Black Widow, thinks Disney will return to theatrical window releases. Despite Disney's experiment with releasing movies like Black Widow and Jungle Cruise day and date in theaters and in the home on the PVOD tier of its Disney Plus Premier IMAX CEO Rich Gelfond doesn't believe the model will be the new normal moving forward. Every studio has seen the same data that Disney's seen. What Disney did is experiment during the pandemic, which is what they said they were going to do, the CEO said during the large format exhibitors Q2 2021 earnings call Tuesday. I remember Disney CEO Bob Chapek saying at one of their investor days that when times are normal, he thinks theatrical is important. Exclusivity is important, Gelfond said, and I think when he looks at his data and the pandemic is in the rearview mirror, he'll come to the same conclusion that everyone else does. The way to maximize value is to have a theatrical window. Now, by the way, all of the studios, usually a theatrical window would be 90 days. So it would be 90 days for a big release to be in theaters before they go onto VOD platforms or onto streaming services. Well, in addition to doing day and date stuff now, they have made permanent, it looks like, the windows have been shortened from 90 days to 45 days, which is something that looks like it's going to be the new normal. They used to sell the same property 5 times, and now they're selling it once. They might be bringing some revenue forward, but there's no proof that points to a better model. He added that a lot of the same people, they will come to the same conclusion. Addressing the fallout from Black Widow, which reportedly made a combined theatrical global box office and PVOD opening of $218 million, but only $316.3 million worldwide to date in pure box office, Gelfond said, "There's really no question in my mind that the combination of PVOD and a lot of piracy, people haven't really talked about it that much, clearly there's a lot of piracy that accounted for the cannibalization. Because once something's streaming, you can rip it off. It's a lot easier to rip off than it is if you are going into a theater with some kind of recording device. It significantly affected the box office at the end of the day. It's hard to quantify it, but some statistics I find interesting is that Fast 9, which is the more traditional distribution model, will gross about $700 million worldwide at the end of its run, and Black Widow will gross half of that." The IMAX boss said, "Black Widow is a great movie, so when I think about it, there was no doubt a lot of money was left on the table." At the domestic box office, Black Widow dropped 68% in its second weekend, the most for any Disney Plus Marvel Cinematic Universe title. The result raised the ire of the National Association of Theater Owners, which slammed the Burbank, California-based studio for allowing the superhero origin title to be mowed down by piracy and truncated windows. Gelfand was upbeat about the future of moviegoing, forecasting that we'll soon see the return of the global theatrical window tentpole in upcoming movies like Venom, Let There Be Carnage, No Time to Die, Top Gun Maverick, and even the Disney Marvel's Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. Don't forget Dune, hopefully. Every studio has a 45-day window next year, Gelfand said, but noted that lower-cost releases will be put on streaming. Meanwhile, IMAX will continue to benefit from big studio tentpoles. Well, while everyone's talking about this, today, Scarlett Johansson, who was a producer on Black Widow and obviously front and center, she was a producer on it, and she was even instrumental in getting Miss Shortland to direct the film. And she was somebody brought on to make this movie. And that was all about Scarlett Johansson bringing her on board. So she did act in a producerial capacity. But part of the reason she accepted this film, make no mistake, when you already have 23 films that make $1 billion, she would have made a contract. She would have had a contract where she took less money up front and built in box office performance bumps to get paid, to get what she's worth. She probably leveraged that to get a producing deal. I'll bet she was going to get paid as a producer as well if the movie made certain box office milestones. And this is a normal thing to do. These are things you negotiate for. So Scarlett Johansson, she negotiated these things. She didn't deserve them. She negotiated them. They're codified in her contracts on paper. They're immutable. You can't go and change them. Disney, however, did change the conditions. They decided to put Black Widow out on Disney+. Unlike what Warner Brothers did, they didn't go to Scarlett Johansson and say, hey, listen, we don't know what's up, so we're going to, as we should have, assume that Black Widow is going to make $1 billion, and based on a $1 billion box office performance, we, in our good faith with you, because part of the reason that there's been 23 movies that have grossed collectively $1 billion each is because of you, Scarlett Johansson. They should have said, we're just going to assume Black Widow made $1 billion, and we are going to pay you accordingly. That's what they should have done. They did not. Now, so today it was reported all over the news. I think it was first reported in the Wall Street Journal, but it was a story that was picked up by Deadline. And let me just jump right in here and share this story with you. Scarlett Johansson sues the Walt Disney Company over day-and-date release of Black Widow in theaters and on Disney+. This was reported at 10:57 a.m. by Ted Johnson and Anthony D'Alessandro on Deadline. Scarlett Johansson filed a lawsuit Thursday against the Wall Street... Can I say? I'm trying to go too fast. I've got too much in my head here. Scarlett Johansson filed a lawsuit on Thursday against the Walt Disney Company, claiming that the studio breached her contract by releasing the Marvel movie Black Widow on Disney Plus at the same time it was released in theaters. The breach of contract lawsuit was filed in Los Angeles. We're going to get to that, by the way. Was filed in Los Angeles Superior Court. The lawsuit claims that by steering audiences to Disney Plus, the media conglomerate wanted to grow, this is all important, to grow its subscriber base and boost its stock price. Yet that was at the expense of Johansson, whose compensation would, quote, largely be based on box office receipts, according to the lawsuit, while she extracted a promise from Marvel that the release of Black Widow would be a theatrical release. The lawsuit also claims that Disney's financial disclosures make clear that the very Disney executives who orchestrated this strategy will personally benefit from their and Disney's misconduct, as it identifies Disney's CEO Bob Chapek's equity grants totaling 3.8 times his $2.5 million base salary in 2021, with the primary justification for that award being the launch of direct-to-consumer services. So what's happening is Disney brass, with the success of Disney Plus, is getting that cheddar. They're getting paid But Scarlett Johansson is not getting paid for her box office bumps. Now, before everybody screams and yells, there are two things that I want to immediately curtail discussing right now, which is the quality of the movie does not matter. Doesn't matter. It's not a factor in this because whether you personally like the movie or not, all of these things are based on the previous Marvel movies, and the fact is she had a contractual obligation, and if the film was opening in a non-pandemic time, her box office bumps would probably have been more. If it opened in China, there's a lot of other factors. The fact is that you can say, well, it didn't perform. Everyone, I know you can say that, but for the sake of argument, the expectation was that the movie was going to make $1 billion, and it very well might have. I mean, Captain Marvel made $1 billion, and people didn't like that very much. I personally like Black Widow. I would like to have seen more of the spy factor in it, but I was really there for the relationship between Yelena and Natasha. I thought that there was a lot of very cool stuff in it. Wasn't as action-packed or as spy thriller-esque as I'd hoped, but I still think it's a respectable entry into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Certainly middle to lower end of it, but still, I enjoyed the film, and I really liked the way it was made. So, but anyway, for the sake of argument, I just want people to understand this isn't about necessarily the quality of the movie. It's about business, and it's about contracts that were signed. So, and Disney executives, they're saving their asses because they're incurring interest payments because the movie was sitting on a shelf for so long, and they're bolstering Disney Plus, which is the future of Disney. So the people that work at Disney, they're making money. They're satisfying their shareholders. They're doing everything they can to keep the company afloat, but they're doing it at the expense of the deals they already made with Scarlett Johansson. It ain't show friends, it's show business. You don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. But if you've negotiated a contract with a studio and it's demonstrably provable that there it is in black and white, here's what you agreed to, and if you do something that you didn't agree to, such as put Black Widow day and date on Disney Plus, wrong guess, Hans. Would you care to go for Double Jeopardy where the scores can really change? That's what's happening here. So let me... In short, the message to and from Disney's top management was clear. Increase Disney Plus subscribers, never mind your contractual promises, and you will be rewarded, the lawsuit states. Kasowitz Benson Torres, LLP's John Berlinski, Johansson's attorney, said in a statement, it's no secret that Disney is releasing films like Black Widow directly onto Disney Plus to increase subscribers and thereby boost the company's stock price, and that it's hiding behind COVID-19 as a pretext to do so. But ignoring the contracts of the artists responsible for the success of its films in furtherance of this short-sighted strategy violates their rights, and we look forward to proving as much in court. This will surely not be the last case where Hollywood talent stands up to Disney and makes it clear that, whatever the company may pretend, it has a legal obligation to honor its contracts. The company did not immediately make a request for comment. Even though Black Widow posted the best domestic opening at the box office with $80.3 million of this year, many in the industry believe money was left on the table with Disney not only crushing the theatrical and PVOD window, but leaving the Marvel movie open for piracy, and pirated it was. Black Widow, according to Torrent Freak, has been the #1 pirated movie since its opening on July 9th. Disney attempted to herald the PIC's opening weekend revenue for the film, saying it made a combined global theatrical and Disney Plus premiere PVOD take of $218 million, $60 million worldwide PVOD, and $158 million worldwide box office. Disney plans to trumpet similar PVOD and box office stats this coming weekend for their Dwayne Johnson, Emily Blunt movie Jungle Cruise, which is also available on Disney Plus premiere for $29.99. However, Black Widow dropped 68% in its second weekend, the worst ever for a Disney release. Marvel movie, indicating that piracy and PVOD had cannibalized the title. The results prompted the National Association of Theater Owners to publicly slam Disney, blah, blah, blah. Further crushing of windows by Disney on Black Widow was announced earlier this week, with the title getting a 33-day theatrical window. Only 33 days in the theater. That's also part of the box office bump time that Scarlett Johansson would get, with Disney premiere before the pick arrives on digital platforms on August 10th, followed by a DVD and Blu-ray release on September 14th, and the Johansson title being completely available for free to Disney Plus subscribers on October 6th. This is a different window practice from Warner's, which has had their new movies in theaters and on HBO Max for the first 30-something days, then exclusive to theaters for another month before any ancillary home windows occur. Meanwhile, Exhibition hasn't gotten a discount on rental terms with Disney on their day-and-date release, many theater owners tell us. This compared to Warner Brothers, which I'm told has been generous on terms with theaters given their pandemic 2021 simultaneous theatrical HBO Max release plan, whereby their streaming subscribers get access to current theatrical movies for free. So this goes on and on and on and on. And so that's where we're at. Things are bad between Scarlett Johansson and Disney. Now, I wrote to my industry guru friend, very successful industry professional, who has a great grasp of these things before I went on the air today, to see what this person said. I wrote to them and I said, "Soothsayer of entertainment, love to get your thoughts on this lawsuit news just announced. Seems Miss Scarlett has a pretty open and shut case. Yes. What do you think?" This person wrote me back and said, "There are a few things I would say with absolute certainty. But in this instance, I can say that this will never make it to trial or even to the discovery stage of litigation." He's absolutely right about that. Discovery is the stage of litigation where both sides must provide all documentation and information requested by both sides of a dispute that is relevant to the facts of the case. Disney will quietly settle this case with some sort of non-disclosure where the amount she gets paid will not become public. But I think Scarlett will eventually be paid her back-end equivalent to the box office of Captain Marvel, plus her legal fees. That's $1 billion. That's what they should have done in the first place. I had one other question that I fired off after that. I said one more question, which I'm absolutely gobsmacked by. This is me talking. After Warner Brothers publicly took care of both Patty Jenkins and Gal Gadot with $10 million payouts after Wonder Woman 84 went day and date to HBO Max, how could the Disney brass not do the same thing with Black Widow? The answer I received: I suspect Disney felt that WB overpaid and didn't want to follow that model with every other actor on their movies because it is problematic that Warner Brothers paid off some, but not all, of the actors that had similar deals with Warner Brothers. I'm sure there are some actors like Angelina Jolie who were unhappy to know that they had to accept less, but didn't want to litigate even though she could have. Obviously, there was that action film with Angelina Jolie that was also day and date at Warner Brothers, but they saw Wonder Woman 84 as a bigger box office ticket. But Angelina Jolie doesn't see herself as lesser than Gal Gadot. So once again, my soothsayer of the entertainment industry speaks the truth. Now, one of the things that I really wanted to get into, and I'm going to share this with you, and it's going to be a long one, and but it's fascinating, is the actual suit. There is more in this suit about how Hollywood works today and where Hollywood is going to be working in the future than anything I've read, whether I'm on the Ankler reading Richard Rutschfield's The Ankler, whether I'm reading something on Jeffrey Wells' Hollywood Elsewhere site, if I'm reading Variety, Hollywood Reporter, Deadline, wherever I'm going to jump around to find industry information and op-ed pieces, I want to share this. But before I jump in there, I do want to go back, and there was a super chat that I missed from a day ago because I didn't do a Robservations, and I want to find it. Let's see if I can find it. It was from Louis Bachman, who wrote in 2 days ago with a very nice super chat and said, "Rob, you mentioned revisiting He-Man in the earlier show. Unsolicited recommendation for the classic series, The Problem with Power, both because it's one of the best and has similarities to the new show's themes. YouTube has legal uploads." Well, thank you for that. I really appreciate that. I always, when somebody tells me to go in and look at various episodes of certain franchise properties, I really appreciate it because it's a way for me to get up to speed without reading everything or watching everything. Having a primer is great. Jay Bling writes in and says, Alexandra Daddario revealed that the sequel to San Andreas won't be happening. For years, I've been constantly reading how a sequel was justified based on the first film's box office alone. Did you ever feel like a sequel was necessary? Well, Jay Bling, judging from the amount of destruction in the first film, I don't know how they could. I mean, they certainly haven't rebuilt Los Angeles since that first movie. I mean, you'd have to say like 50 years later. So I think making a sequel just because the box office to San Andreas is a little difficult considering how much the world was ravaged or how much California was ravaged. I guess you could have another Pacific Rim country or someplace destroyed, but that might be a little weird. So it doesn't surprise me. Emil Johansson says, Rob, please visit me in Sweden. I will buy you a beer. Emil, are you kidding me? I will come to Sweden and I will get you and Stubble McShave and anyone else, and we'll do a live show from Sweden. That's one of my dreams. I want to just drive around. I'd love to spend like a couple of months just traveling the world, meeting imagination connoisseurs and broadcasting live with all of y'all. Stubble McShave says, first of all, sends in a tip. Thank you. Stubble McShave sends in a tip and says, Schwarzenegger took no money on top for Twins. He would receive just over 20% of the total earnings. He ended up with over $40 million. Schwarzenegger was always a smart man. Nick Parrish sends in a tip and says, what up, Rob? Well, for all the spectators wondering if and when Black Widow is coming back from the dead, you got your answer in loud and clear Dolby sound. Meanwhile, at AMC, Adam Aaron is watching the drama thinking, I love it when a plan comes together. Well, Nick, I'll tell you what. I think no one's ever been in a better negotiating position than Scarlett Johansson is right now. I mean, I would imagine that not only is she going to leverage what's going on here to get the box office, as my soothsayer friend said, as if Black Widow made $1 billion, she's also probably going to get a fat producing deal, maybe a first look deal, a housekeeping deal, something like that. Because, I mean, she's been a huge part of the Marvel family since early on for the last decade. And this is absolutely not something that Disney wants lingering. I'm sure the situation will be, I would imagine, I wouldn't be surprised if this situation is resolved by August, because they don't want this overseeing by the end of August. They don't want this overshadowing the release of Shang-Chi or the Eternals. They don't want more bad blood. It's like when New Line, when the actors from Lord of the Rings got together and they're like, hey, we made this, we didn't have SAG contracts. Yo, what's up? And New Line did the right thing, or Warner Brothers did the right thing and paid some people. Jason S. says, when actors file these kinds of lawsuits against studios, does that negatively affect their ability to get hired by that movie studio in the future? Or is this seen as a normal cost of doing business with actors? Will Disney work with her in the future? That's a great question, Jason, and I would say you never know. But this is something that, this is Disney making their bed. To me, it just looks stupid that they should have addressed this issue early on, especially with someone that has been a foundational member. I'm sure maybe the thought was, oh, it doesn't matter, she's dead anyway. Well, this was a mistake. This was not good management, and I understand where it was all coming from, but it wasn't. This is not doing good show business. Not good show business. Captain Spire sends in a super chat and says, I appreciate that video about Axonar more than I can tell. I needed some soul closure, and you did it professionally and honestly. Thank you. Well, Captain Spire, I appreciate that. For those of you who don't know, I was a part of the Axonar project. We started out with the short film Prelude to Axonar, directed by Christian Gossett. I was the editor, post-supervisor, basically, and I was given a lot of creative leeway. It's a long story. I won't get into the whole thing here, but I did put an interview up on the channel with John Kirk as a special feature the other day, and in the description, there's links to all of these things, the Axonar project and everything that I was doing. And, of course, the person who started the Axonar project has literally gone after legally. He's tried to sue me. He couldn't sue me in California. The case was thrown out because of SLAPP laws. He actually sued me in Georgia. I've never worked in Georgia. He sues people specifically to try and bully them into giving settlements. He is a vexatious litigator, and he is. I didn't know this at the time. I thought we were birds of a feather, but he is not. He's not a good person. He is not anything like he says he is. And it's still an interesting story. And there's a documentary being made about the whole situation that Paul Jenkins, Eisner Award-winning Paul Jenkins, who's going to be on this channel in the next couple weeks talking about this, is making, called Into the Wormhole. So totally crowdfunded, and they're starting shooting it next month. So this is unlike Axanar. The last time the Axanar project did something that they did properly, I did it. I did it 6 years ago and made the Vulcan scene, which I welcome you to all watch on their YouTube channel. Go to the Vulcan scene. I'm very proud of it. I conceived of that scene, directed it, planned it, edited it, post-supervised it, and we shot it against a 20-foot green screen, a 20 by, so it was 20-foot by 20-foot green screen in a parking lot. And I wanted to show what was possible. We did it for $15,000. So imagine with Gary Graham playing Soval, coming back to play Soval. So check that out. Captain Spire, I thank you for the kind words. So anyway, let's see. Royce Freeman fires in another super chat and says, if an actress agrees to do nude scenes in a script, then changes her mind on set, do the filmmakers have to let the actress know they will use a nude stand-in? I ran into that problem. When we were making Femme Fatales, there were actresses that so wanted to work, they had to sign nudity riders. And we were which means they agreed to do nudity before we would cast them. And there were a few actresses that thought on the day they could do a bait and switch and not do the nudity that they signed up to do. Again, not a good thing. It's not a good situation. You shouldn't ever do that to your producers or to the crew or to your fellow actors. If you sign up to do nudity, you've signed up to do nudity, because it ain't show friends, it's show business. So really, ladies out there or men, if you are signing up to do nudity in film, remember, carefully consider it before you do it. Really understand what you want, find out what the producers expect. And my producers on Femme Fatales had me call every single actor or actress that I would be working with shooting sex scenes before we were ever on set. And we had long conversations, exactly what was expected of them and what I wanted to shoot and how I wanted to shoot it. So when we were on set, there were never any concerns. One of my actresses in one of my episodes didn't want to do a nude scene. So when you do that, if you don't want to do the nude scene, yeah, you can absolutely bring in a body double, shoot it, and combine it with close-ups or do whatever you want to do. A contract is a contract. It ain't show friends, it's show business. You don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. Keep that in mind always. So before I jump into more super chats or the great letters I have, I really want to read this complaint. This is Scarlett Johansson's complaint. It is long, and I want to delve into it because this has more to say about the entertainment business than a lot of things that I've read in a long time. Plaintiff, Periwinkle Entertainment Incorporated, who is FSO Scarlett Johansson, Miss Johansson, or plaintiff, alleges against the Walt Disney Company as follows. By the way, this is the complaint that was filed today in the Los Angeles courtroom. This was on Deadline, so kudos to Deadline for getting it. That's where I got it from, as you should know. Number one, introduction. Over the past decade, Scarlett Johansson's work has generated billions of dollars for Marvel Studios and, by extension, its parent company, Disney. In recognition of and reliance on this impressive track record, Marvel and Miss Johansson agreed that her compensation for starring in the latest motion picture addition to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or MCU, Black Widow, the picture, would be based largely off box office receipts generated by the picture. To maximize these receipts and thereby protect her financial interests, Miss Johansson extracted a promise, well, I don't know what that means, from Marvel that the release of the picture would be a theatrical release. As Miss Johansson, Disney, Marvel, and most everyone else in Hollywood knows, a theatrical release is a release that is exclusive to movie theaters. Disney was well aware of this promise, but nonetheless directed Marvel to violate its pledge and instead release the picture on the Disney Plus streaming service the very same day it was released in movie theaters. 2. The reasons for this were twofold. First, Disney wanted to lure the picture's audience away from movie theaters and towards its owned streaming service, where it could keep the revenues for itself while simultaneously growing the Disney Plus subscriber base, a proven way to boost Disney's stock price. None of that is a lie, and neither is it wrong. Second, by the way, it's not necessarily a bad thing either. It's just that Disney promised a theatrical release with a certain window when Black Widow was made, when they were making it 3 years ago. Second, Disney wanted to substantially devalue Miss Johansson's agreement and thereby enrich itself. In the months leading up to this lawsuit, Miss Johansson gave Disney and Marvel every opportunity to right their wrong and make good on Marvel's promise, meaning pay me for the theatrical release window because you've changed the game and that's not what I signed up for. And she's correct. Unlike numerous other movie studios, however, including Warner Brothers, who on information and belief settled with its talent on films such as Wonder Woman after it released those films day and date to its streaming service HBO Max last year, Disney and Marvel largely ignored Miss Johansson, essentially forcing her to file this action. I believe that to be absolutely true. That's exactly what they did. They brought this on themselves. Miss Johansson is one of Hollywood's most well-known and talented actresses with decades of acting experience and a lengthy filmography of critically acclaimed and financially successful performances. After making her feature film debut at 10 years old, she's appeared in both comedies and dramas, including numerous award-winning films such as Lost in Translation, Vicky Cristina Barcelona, Marriage Story, and Jojo Rabbit. In 2010, Miss Johansson proved that she could also perform in an action-packed blockbuster when she appeared in Iron Man 2, 11 years ago, a superhero film based on characters and stories from Marvel Comics. In that film, Miss Johansson played Natasha Romanoff, better known by her superhero name Black Widow. For her work, she garnered significant acclaim, including a Best Supporting Actress nomination from the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror Films. You go! I used to be the director of special events. She went on to reprise the role of Black Widow in 6 more films, helping to build what would eventually become the MCU, one of the biggest and most lucrative film franchises ever created. In 2019, Marvel Studios officially announced that Black Widow and Miss Johansson would have their own film. Prior to this announcement, representatives from Marvel and Miss Johansson had finalized a deal for her services in connection with the picture. That deal is set forth in an agreement dated as of May 9th, 2017, and a series of amendments thereto, collectively referred to as the agreement. At issue in this lawsuit is the portion of this agreement that guaranteed her a share of box office receipts, meaning receipts from the movie theater ticket sales. To protect her financial interests in those box office receipts, Miss Johansson obtained from Marvel a valuable contractual promise that the release of the picture would be a wide theatrical release. Remember, this was pre-COVID, and when she made this, she was acting in what's called reliance, that it would be like the previous 23 Marvel movies, be released theatrically, and the expectant box office would be commensurate with the previous 23 Marvel films. There was no reason to think not. Everybody was negotiating with that in mind. So it would be disingenuous to suggest otherwise. Both parties, as well as Disney, understood this meant that the picture would initially be released exclusively in movie theaters and that it would remain exclusively in movie theaters for a period of between approximately, this is important too, 90 and 120 days. That was what's called the theatrical window between a theatrical release and a release on pay-per-view or PVOD or SVOD, whatever you want to call it, because that's what it used to be. Because of the pandemic, these windows have been shortened to 45 days. In the case of Black Widow, that release was shortened to 33 days. This roughly 90 to 120-day theatrical window was not only industry standard at the time the agreement was finalized, but also standard practice for prior Marvel movies distributed by Disney, including those starring Miss Johansson. In November 2019, approximately 6 months after the agreement was entered into, Disney launched Disney Plus, its wholly owned flagship subscription video-on-demand service. Leading up to this launch, the SVOD market was crowded with established players such as Netflix, Amazon, and Hulu, and newcomers such as HBO Now and Apple TV, all competing for subscribers. In order to convince consumers that Disney Plus was worth the $7, now $8 monthly access fee, and to convince investors that the service would be profitable, Disney announced that offerings on Disney Plus would include Disney's entire library of films, a number of library television series, original content, and crucially, that Disney Plus would eventually be the go-to source to stream the MCU. In light of these announcements, Ms. Johansson's representatives sought assurances that Marvel would hold up its end of the bargain with respect to the theatrical release of the picture guaranteed in her contract. In response, Marvel's chief counsel confirmed to Ms. Johansson's representatives in May of 2019, "We totally understand that Scarlett's willingness to do the film and her whole deal is based on the premise that the film would be widely theatrical released like our other pictures. We understand that should the plan change, we would need to discuss this with you and come to an understanding that the deal is based on a series of very large box office bonuses." Marvel thereby confirmed the parties' understanding that 1. The box office bonus component of Ms. Johansson's agreement represented the lion's share of her expected compensation, and 2. The wide theatrical release that Marvel had promised would be like our other pictures, meaning standard Marvel MCU 90 to 120 days of theatrical exclusivity. In late March 2021, however, in direct violation of these promises and her agreement, Disney announced that the picture, Black Widow, would be simultaneously released in theaters and on Disney Plus Premier Access, a service available only to Disney Plus subscribers that provides unlimited on-demand access to select films for an additional $30 per film fee beyond the monthly subscription cost. On information and belief, this was the direct result of Disney directing Marvel to ignore Ms. Johansson's agreement and or overruling Marvel's wishes to comply with it. In the marketing campaign that followed, Disney frequently highlighted the picture's upcoming availability on Disney Plus, usually side by side with Ms. Johansson's image. Throughout this process, Ms. Johansson, through her representatives, attempted to negotiate with Marvel to reach the aforementioned alternative understanding that Marvel's chief counsel had promised under these circumstances. Ultimately, however, Marvel ignored this outreach. No resolution was reached, and the picture was simultaneously released in theaters and on Disney Plus Premier Access on July 9th, 2021. This is not Kevin Feige's fault, for those of you who are asking. It's not Marvel's fault. They're completely beholden to their distributor and their parent company, Disney. Number 9, to no one's surprise, Disney's breach of the agreement successfully pulled millions of fans away from theaters and toward its Disney Plus streaming service. Undeniable. According to Disney's own self-congratulatory press release, the picture grossed more than $60 million on Disney Plus Premier Access in its first weekend alone. As numerous publications noted, this strategy dramatically decreased box office revenue for the picture. According to an article from one well-known Hollywood trade journal, published 3 days after the picture was released, quote, "Veteran distribution executives say it's clear that the availability of the movie on Disney Plus cannibalized the box office, noting that an entire household might have gone to see the movie in the theater, but could instead pay just $30 to watch it together at home." Another article from a different but equally well-known and established industry publication declared, "There's no question that the Disney Plus premiere availability of Black Widow ate into its domestic opening weekend box office. Notably, however, Disney's stock price jumped 4% in the days following that picture's release." 11. Of course, this was Disney's plan all along. Disney knew that a day-and-date release on Disney Plus would drive up the total number of Disney Plus subscribers, a key metric impacting Disney's stock price, both by luring new subscribers to Disney Plus and by giving existing ones reasons to keep paying their monthly fees, thus reducing subscriber churn. Disney also knew that having such a well-known film as the picture debut on Disney Plus would help it justify the future price increases to Disney Plus monthly subscription fees. Make no mistake, this is a big point. What they're going to do is they're going to do more of these exclusive releases, and they're going to up their price to something that's more comparable to Netflix, like $15 a month. So, hey, you no longer have to pay $30 to get exclusive access. You're going to get exclusive access anyway, but we're going to double your subscription price, and you do that to 100 million people at once. Well then, that's a lot of cheddar Disney Plus is going to make, but that's their plan. That's exactly what they're doing. And by the way, good on Disney. That's good business. It ain't show friends, it's show business. And that's what they're doing here, and rightfully so. I think Disney Plus's content is worthy of that much money. Wait till the new Star Wars shows come out. Moreover, Disney knew that its ability to deliver blockbuster content like Black Widow to its subscribers would perpetuate the view of many investors, as reflected in Disney's share price, that Disney Plus is the only streaming platform that has a chance to one day compete with rival streaming giant Netflix, providing another way to bolster Disney's market valuation. In short, Disney chose to placate Wall Street investors and pad its bottom line rather than allow its subsidiary Marvel company, with the agreement. Now, by the way, I would like to say this. Disney is doing good business here. I have no problem with what they're doing. What they should have done was make a deal with Scarlett Johansson based on, as they were saying, pay her what Captain Marvel did. Before you even saw how the movie went down, they weren't giving it its proper due. It was not going to get a proper theatrical release. And once you knew that, if Disney went to Scarlett Johansson and said, hey, listen, Bob Chapek should have called old Scarlett in. Miss Scarlett, he should have been like an old Southern gentleman, maybe with a mint julep, handed it to her and said, listen, you and Colin Jost, you got to get paid, right? You got to get paid. We know, I know there's a pandemic, but you know what? It ain't show friends, it's show business. You've been doing business with us for 10 years. We're not going to fuck you. You just got married. We wouldn't want to do that. But no, they did. They ended up fucking her, and she didn't get kissed first. And it was bad. And Disney should have done that, because everything that this article is saying is, yes, Disney is doing, no one does better business than Disney, man. They provide, what they're doing is they're giving direct-to-consumer entertainment. They're cutting out the middleman. That's what every studio wants to do. Cut out everybody. Cut out the exhibitors. We're going to sell direct to the consumers. We don't even have to put things in movie theaters. We just make a file. Not a whole lot of money there. You're making more money than ever. So all of this is about that. Her suit is exactly like this. Make no mistake, just like my soothsayer was saying, this suit will never go further. As a matter of fact, I bet you, we read in the trades that this is resolved by the end of August, if not sooner. Because this is putting them on notice. Because if they didn't do this, as every bit of talent, I mean, they have them as what, remember the old John Frankenheimer movie? You probably don't, with Don Johnson, called Dead Bang. I mean, Scarlett Johansson, they all had, and her peeps had Disney dead bang with this. There's nothing that they could do. Now they might want to fight, but I can't imagine worse optics for Disney to go after their own Black Widow, Natasha Romanoff, and not make good with the amount of money. I mean, there's just no justifying it, and it's their mistake. They fucked up. No way around that. The icing on the cake for Disney was that with the bulk of Miss Johansson's compensation being tied to box office receipts, Disney knew that the cannibalization of such receipts by Disney Plus would save Marvel, and by extension Disney, very large amounts of money that it would otherwise owe to Miss Johansson. On information and belief, Disney intentionally induced Marvel's breach of contract without justification in order to prevent Miss Johansson from realizing the full benefit of her bargain with Marvel. Disney's financial disclosures make clear that the very Disney executives who orchestrated this strategy will personally benefit from their and Disney's misconduct. In fiscal year 2021, Disney's chief executive officer, Bob Chapek, was awarded equity grants totaling, I already read this. So that goes on. We know that Bob Iger and Bob Chapek are making money, and this goes on, parties and all that, what they want. Now, they go into the factual background, and they talk about everything that she's done, and the Avengers, and everything that we all know. Now, here's the real interesting part. The agreement. The agreement dated May 9th, 2017, sets forth the understanding between Periwinkle Entertainment, referred to therein as the lender, that's Scarlett Johansson's company, and Marvel, referred to therein as the producer, concerning Miss Johansson's, referred to as artist, services in connection with the picture. Paragraph 2, entitled Engagement, states, and this is her contract now, lender shall furnish producer the services of artist to perform the role of Black Widow, Natasha Romanoff, in the theatrical motion picture currently titled Black Widow. For the avoidance of doubt, if producer in its sole discretion determines to release the picture, then such release shall be a wide theatrical release of the picture in no less than 1,500 screens. You don't get what you deserve. You get what you negotiate. At the time the agreement was entered, it was well understood by the parties and Disney that a theatrical release, referred to as an exclusive release in theaters for an extended period of time that was roughly 90 to 120 days. With the exception of certain less valuable direct-to-video releases, it has long been the custom and practice in the film industry for feature films to have at least a 90-day exclusive theatrical release before they are released on home video. Now, it's important to remember, this was industry standard. Back in 2017, when they entered into this agreement, nobody could have seen COVID-19 coming. I mean, we were eventually going to have some global pandemic, but no one knew. So this was industry standard. And, I mean, that's it. And what's great is, for Scarlett Johansson, you've got 23 Marvel movies to prove this. It's precedent. It's a big precedent. It's a precedent that if it went to a jury trial, the jury would be like, come on, guys. Really? A 33-day window for Black Widow theatrical? Come on. Day and date with Disney Plus? Really? What are you trying to pull here? I mean, it's so obvious. This case is so cut and dried. But anyway, it's very interesting. But remember, I will say this. This is not to say that the business doesn't change. Like, what's going to happen because of this lawsuit? Boy, things are going to change in terms of... And by the way, it's going to give ultimately the studios more power, and talent is going to have less power because studios are just going to say, well, that's the way of the world now. It's a 45-day window. So your box office bump was just cut in half. It's like everything else. The streaming services have brought the salaries of everyone in every part of the industry down. You'd think, I mean, people are working harder, but they're making less than probably ever before. Unless, of course, you make a fat deal for, say, The Exorcist or Knives Out, in which case a few people are making out like bandits. But that's for another stream. These promises concerning the picture's release, including the language requiring a wide theatrical release, set forth on the very first page of the agreement, and the same paragraph establishes Miss Johansson's role and services were material and essential to the agreement. That is because, in addition to certain fixed compensation, meaning what she was going to get paid, her paycheck, Ms. Johansson was to receive deferred compensation and bonuses directly tied to the amount of worldwide box office. So what this does, essentially, is, unlike Jim Carrey for The Cable Guy, they're not going to pay Scarlett Johansson $20 million to star as Black Widow. They're not going to pay her that. And what that does is it brings the budget of the film down. And to me, to my mind, it's actually responsible filmmaking. When you tie in, I mean, and look, unlike Jimmy Fallon's character in Almost Famous, you get what you can, when you can, how you can. Nobody wants to do that. You know, nobody wants to do that because they would rather get paid up front because everyone thinks, well, with studio accounting and all the shenanigans, you're never going to make that much money. So it's still the thinking with lawyers and agents and managers, get as much money as you can. In the case of Scarlett Johansson, well, it's a Marvel movie, so you do have those 23 movies as precedent, and you do have that average box office for each film as $1 billion. So it seemed like for Scarlett Johansson, who was a producer on this movie and had to think like a producer, okay, that's good. So I'm going to cost the production less up front and bet on its performance, which I think is always a good thing, as long as you can rely on your partners to pay you accordingly, which, by the way, you can never do that in Hollywood because they're going to fuck you. They'll figure out how to fuck you. Even though it ain't show friends, it's show business, you got to have the greatest entertainment attorneys in the world to make these deals because you'll get fucked. No lubrication, no rim job. You'll just get fucked, and it's not good. And they're going to do it no matter what. So you got to go into those negotiations with that in mind. So the greater the worldwide box office, the more Miss Johansson stands to earn. In other words, Miss Johansson's compensation for the picture hinges upon worldwide box office receipts and, by extension, a traditional exclusive theatrical release consistent with Marvel's past theatrical releases. And that would allow her to realize the full value of her bargain. So, you know, you're acting on what's called reliance as well. You know, in addition to what you've negotiated, there are previous things that you've negotiated that you assume. I know you're never supposed to assume anything. That's why I say get it all in writing. But there's ways that they've done this. This is not like this was not anyone's first rodeo. So these kinds of agreements should be gone into, and you know it should have been done. And then they bring out Disney Plus. By the time Disney Plus launched on November 12, 2019, it was competing with a number of other major subscription streaming platforms, including but not limited to Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime Video, CBS All Access, HBO Now, and Apple TV Plus. With an initial subscription fee of $7 per month, which was thereafter increased to $8 per month, Disney Plus needed premium content to convince potential customers to dig into their wallets and shell out for yet another premium SVOD service. At a shareholder meeting on March 7, 2019, Disney's then CEO Bob Iger announced that Disney's entire feature film library would be made available on Disney Plus. Now, something I've neglected to mention is they also get deals, home video deals. Like when a movie is released on home video, you can also have performance or SVOD based on the sales of the physical media, the sales of the SVOD. There's other performance-based incentives as well. Mr. Iger indicated Disney Plus would have its own slate of original films and series. In light of these announcements, Ms. Johansson's representatives reached out to Marvel. They reached out to Marvel to confirm that the launch of Disney Plus would not impact the exclusive wide theatrical release Ms. Johansson had bargained for in the agreement. Dave Galluzzi, Marvel's chief counsel, responded on March 20th, 2019. Further to our conversation today, it is 100% our plan to do a typical wide release of Black Widow. We have very high expectations for the film and are very excited to try and do for Black Widow what we've done with Captain Marvel. We totally understand that Scarlett Johansson's willingness to do the film and her whole deal is based on the premise that the film would be widely theatrically released like our other pictures. Now, this is Marvel's counsel saying it, and why would Marvel's counsel think otherwise? There was no pandemic then. There's no reason to believe that it would be any different. Even though there was Disney Plus now, as I've always said, movies gain their value with their theatrical release. There was probably never any thought. I mean, there might have been thought putting lesser films on, but not a Marvel movie. Not a Marvel movie that's going to gross $1 billion worth of fat cheddar on the theatrical circuit around the world. So, totally agree. Marvel's like, nope, it's going to be just like other pictures. We understand that should the plan change, we would need to discuss this with you and come to an understanding, as the deal is based on a series of very large box office bonuses. Mr. Galluzzi attached a fully executed copy of the agreement to this email. Thus, Mr. Galluzzi, on Marvel's behalf, communicated his understanding that Ms. Johansson's worldwide box office bonus was her primary consideration under the agreement, that the picture would be widely theatrically released, and that this release would be like our other pictures, meaning exclusively to theaters for between 82 and 159 days, with an average uninterrupted window of 117 days. Moreover, Mr. Galluzzi acknowledged on behalf of Marvel that any change in that planned theatrical release would materially and adversely impact the value of the agreement to Ms. Johansson, and thus the deal would need to be renegotiated to account for the reduction in her promised back-end compensation. Exactly. Hello. Like, when you decided to make Black Widow day and date on Disney Plus, I'm sure Kevin Feige probably made the call like, yo, our lead actress, the person that everybody loves, it's like you got to do right by her. And I don't know what the thought process was, but I'll tell you one thing. Kevin Feige brought it up. He brought it up, and because he's no dummy. And somebody probably said no, or it was above even Kevin Feige's pay grade, because this became a Disney issue. In blatant breach of Marvel's promises to Ms. Johansson, Disney gives the picture a day-and-date release on Disney+. The picture was initially scheduled to be released on May 1st, 2020. However, its release was delayed several times during the COVID-19 pandemic. As of September 2020, the picture was scheduled to be released exclusively in theaters on May 7th, 2021. By early 2021, industry commentators began speculating about the possibility that the picture's release might be delayed again, or in the alternative that it might be released simultaneously in theaters and on Disney+. When asked by an industry publication in January 2021 if the picture would stick to a theatrical release or go to Disney+, Marvel's president Kevin Feige was non-committal. But he admitted that parent company Disney, not Marvel, was calling the shots when it came to Marvel Studios content on Disney Plus and in theaters, and that the intent was for the MCU's storytelling to continue to unfold both in theaters and on Disney's flagship streaming platform, stating, this is Kevin Feige now, all I can tell you is that for the past 3 years since Bob Iger brought me into his office and talked about a streaming platform that would become Disney Plus and asked us to start working on programs for it, our long lead plan was to have the MCU and the storytelling woven between weekly episodic big swings on Disney Plus and into the future big swings in theaters. So, here's the thing. For all of you people that think I am a Marvel shill, you're correct. I love the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I love Kevin Feige. I love what he's done. It's unprecedented in Hollywood. But why I love Kevin Feige the most, and by the way, I've never met Kevin Feige, although I had worked at Donner's. I was there. I worked at Silver and I worked at Donner before he was there with Jeff Johns or whatever. I admire the fact that he worked his way up. He's worked really in one franchise, the Marvel Universe. He worked on 13 Marvel movies before starting on Iron Man, 2008's Iron Man. He saw what worked. He saw what didn't work. By God, how do I wish that there was a Kevin Feige that was on Star Trek. Somebody that knows the material inside and out, who's a big geek, who understands how all this stuff works, and he's also the most successful producer in Hollywood history. He also knew that, I'm moving forward with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and we're moving it over to Disney Plus, and why not? How exciting, right? So he's caught between a rock and a hard place. He's got his corporate minders, his Disney overlords that he's working with. Disney Plus, he's like, yes, I know you will. And it's like he wants to do both, and why wouldn't you? So he's sitting there going, I'll bet you, he said, guys, we got to pay Scarlett. And you can tell that he's sheepish. What's he going to do? They're going to launch the Marvel shows during a pandemic. What better way to get people to watch those Marvel shows, right? So Kevin Feige's like, what am I going to do here? Well, it's really not my problem. I mean, it is now because Kevin Feige knew this was going to happen. As a matter of fact, I would dare say that Kevin Feige, probably Scarlett Johansson back-channeled this shit to Kevin Feige, and Kevin Feige's like, you got to do what you got to do, because his hands were tied. He's like, you got to force their hand. And it's great because he knew that Disney's not going to let this stand. As a matter of fact, I mean, again, I am speculating here. And see, here's the thing. A lot of people might sit there and go, well, I just like people that are doing good business in Hollywood. Kevin Feige's done some great business in Hollywood. This, for Scarlett Johansson to take this lawsuit out, this is, I'm sorry to say, it's good business. And it's the only way that Scarlett Johansson, in this situation where, do you think as she took on the role of producer, do you think what's happened and how Disney's played it? I mean, you think Kevin Feige's happy with this, seeing one of his lead actresses, who he probably has gotten to know very well over the last couple of years or last decade. She's been a vital component. I mean, how many Hot Toys figures have they made of her? 10? I mean, she's a vital... I have one right there. She's a vital component of the MCU. And so Kevin Feige probably even said, and they're like, oh, you think she's going to sue us? Yes, I do. Yes, as a matter of fact, I know she's going to sue us. Or she's going to sue you. She's not going to sue Marvel because she's got you dead bang. Come on, what's up? And then someone's going to say, that wasn't the best Frankenheimer movie. Yeah, but Don Johnson was in it, so it was kind of rad. But anyway, so that's the way things are. And this goes on and on and on. I could read more of this, but I'm going to tell you what. I'm not going to read any more of this because I think I've made my point. I'm going to put this into the chat, and you can read it yourself. It's fascinating. It is very fascinating. Read it because it shows how business is done in Hollywood, and I think, Scarlett Johansson has a point. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of people going, well, the kind of money, these Hollywood elites and blah, blah, blah. Look, Scarlett Johansson has worked her ass off to become successful, just like anybody does. Remember, Amazon 27 years ago was in one room with a Kinko's printed banner on the wall, and Jeff Bezos was there. Now, you might hate people that get rich, but these people work their ass off to get where they are. It's not like somebody handed the shit to her. I mean, and no one knew, by the way, if the Marvel Cinematic Universe would become what it became. In 2008, Iron Man was a big gamble. You know the only person who knew it would work, I think, ultimately? Well, Jon Favreau and Kevin Feige knew it would work. I mean, to the point where they're hiring Robert Downey Jr., which everyone was saying, come on, after his trials and tribulations, they hired him, and with Kevin Feige's the moves he's made, he knew this was going to go down. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Scarlett's kept him appraised of the situation, and this happened. So, oh, by the way, there is one thing I want to share on this. This is pretty interesting. Marvel's breach is the direct result of Disney's tortious interference. Why would Disney forego hundreds of millions of dollars in box office receipts by releasing the picture in theaters at a time when it knew the theatrical market was weak, rather than waiting a few months for the market to recover? On information and belief, the decision to do so was made at least in part because Disney saw the opportunity to promote its flagship subscription streaming service using the picture and Miss Johansson, thereby attracting new paying monthly subscribers, retaining existing ones, and establishing Disney Plus as a must-have service in an increasingly competitive marketplace. Miss Johansson and the express promises that Marvel had made to her concerning worldwide box office bonuses and a traditional theatrical release like our other pictures were simply collateral damage. By interfering with the agreement and inducing Marvel to breach it, Disney not only increased the value of Disney Plus, but also intentionally saved Marvel and thereby itself what Marvel referred to as a very large box office bonus, or bonuses, that Marvel otherwise would have been obligated to pay Miss Johansson. Disney unquestionably understood how it would benefit from inducing a breach of the agreement. When he announced the release of another Disney film, Mulan, on Disney Plus Premier Access, Bob Chapek noted that under a Premier Access offering, not only does it get us revenue from our original transaction of premium video on demand, but it's a fairly large stimulus to sign up for Disney Plus. Of course. So read all of that. It's really interesting. And here's another thing they say. Traditionally, if a moviegoer enjoyed a film enough to see it a second time, he or she would have to either buy another theater ticket or wait to buy the film on home video, electronic sell-through like iTunes, or some other form of distribution after the theatrical window concluded. That's also some big cheddar. And historically, there was no shortage of Marvel superfans willing to do so. Indeed, movie ticket service Fandango announced that in the first week alone, Avengers Endgame saw 85% more repeat viewings than Avengers Infinity War. Marvel itself has banked on these repeat viewers in the past, having re-released Avengers Endgame with 7 minutes of additional footage in an explicit bid to draw in enough additional ticket sales to make the film the highest grossing of all time. In fact, the Guinness World Records for the most time seeing the same film in theaters is held by a Marvel fan who saw Avengers Endgame 191 times in theater. The previous record was held by a fan who saw Avengers Infinity War 103 times. But with Premier Access, there are no repeat ticket sales. Subscribers pay a one-time fee to view the picture as many times as they want. It is tantamount to handing each moviegoer a free DVD on their way out of the theater. On top of that, unlike in the theaters, a single Premier Access purchase of the picture can be shared with tens, if not hundreds, of would-be paying moviegoers whose ticket buying would have generated a worldwide box office. Still, other viewers will forego the theater and the $30 Premier Access fee because they know they can simply wait what is widely expected to be just 90 days to access the picture on Disney Plus, their regular $8 monthly subscription. And millions of others who would have watched in the theaters will instead view the picture on perfect digital pirated copies, all made possible by Disney's decision to release the picture day and date on Disney Plus. Indeed, Black Widow was the #1 pirated title of the week of July 19th, per the news site Torrent Freak. All of this has undermined the consideration promised to Miss Johansson in her agreement and ignores Marvel's recognition that her whole deal is based on the premise that the film would be widely theatrical release, like other pictures. Now this is the best. Adding insult to injury, Miss Johansson has spent the last several months fulfilling her own obligation under the agreement to promote the picture, and therefore, by association, its release on Disney Plus. In other words, Disney has enjoyed the benefits of having one of Hollywood's top actresses promote its wholly owned subscription service at no additional cost to Disney. Because when she agrees, by the way, stars of movies, it's in their contracts that they must do press before their movie opens. It's contractually obligated to the studio. You have to do this. But when it went to Disney Plus isn't saying that, oh, well, Scarlett, we're going to pay you money above and beyond what Disney was going to pay you because now you're promoting Disney Plus. Everywhere Black Widow went, it said Disney Plus. Every time she made an appearance, it's going to be in theaters and be on Disney Plus. So it was a twofer. So Scarlett Johansson in promoting this film was also promoting Disney Plus, and probably, I will willing to bet you, did not get paid any extra money for that, which is another way. What do? Say it with me now. They fucked her. They fucked her. Now, if you can get away with it, don't ask for permission, beg for forgiveness. Well, now Disney, beg for forgiveness to the tune of box office bumps to the tune of $1 billion. Just pay her. Pay her now. And you're going to have to at some point, because you're not going to send this to a jury trial. Yeah. So there you go. Read this. It's really interesting. I know I've been going on a long time about this, but it's fascinating. It's a fascinating look into how Hollywood does business. And you realize, look, I love Hollywood. I love movies. I love working on films. I really do. But I wish that the business side of making movies was a lot easier and easier to navigate. The business side of Hollywood and the artistic side of Hollywood, while they have to coexist, they do not coexist peacefully. Basically, you're living, if you're an artist or you're a filmmaker or whatever, very few filmmakers, I mean, even very few get to live in the lap of luxury. It's like this with every movie. It doesn't matter how big it is or how small it is. There's always some shenanigans that are going down. Somebody's trying to screw you out of money. People aren't going to give you what you're worth. The studios are trying to save money. It's a nightmare. I love making movies though, so that's why I stick it out. I'm surprised that I haven't at some point taken a Rambo-like knife and shoved it into my eye socket, take myself out, or do a Joker thing where I can put it on a table and just end it all. I guess that's the time to promote the fact that Tango Shalom will be in theaters beginning September and on VOD on October 29th. So, you know what? I will shamelessly turn in this entire channel, and I hope you're there for me, because how many times do you get to have a movie come out theatrically? So there you go. So, folks, there it is. There's my thoughts. There's other people's thoughts. The Scarlett Johansson story, Black Widow, she's getting vengeance against Disney. So, anyway, I'm going to jump into your letters. There's a lot of people sending in super chats and tips and all that, which you can still do. And we'll jump into some more. I know I was reading super chats and tips beforehand, and I will let me jump into a few more of those. Terev sends in a super chat and says, guaranteed they were setting up Black Widow to be a trilogy, hence the different hair colors in Infinity War, Endgame, and Black Widow 2, helping Cap with the raft escape, and Black Widow 3 during the blip. Oh, I'm almost positive of that, which would actually be pretty cool. I'm sure they were going to bring her back. Alexander Wilson says, Disney's response, there's no merit whatsoever to this filing. The lawsuit is especially sad and is distressing in its callous disregard for the horrific and prolonged effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Disney has fully complied with Miss Johansson. Is that really what they said? That's just simply not true. It's simply not true. And you know what they're trying to do? They're trying to curry favor. They brought up the COVID-19 pandemic in their statement. Look, the COVID pandemic has nothing at all to do with this at all. Maybe they could claim in their contract there's something called force majeure, act of God or whatever. Nope, that's not what happened here, and they know it. Boy, that's interesting that's their tactic. Well, we'll see. Jeremiah, our friend Jeremiah says, Jeremiah Bailey got a YouTube channel picking up where you left off and streaming at midnight. She's mad. Berlinski, the $51 million Hulu Bones lawyer, is repping her. Wow. Well, that's good. Jeremiah, by the way, is a great presence that I got to meet over doing the Midnighter. He's coming to us out of Houston. He's a very educated, learned dude. He knows his stuff. He's read his comics. He's read his science fiction. He's read his film criticism. And if he's going to take my midnight slot, I recommend you all seek out Jeremiah. He has a lot to say, and I welcome that. we could always have a co-production deal with us. We do have a partnership program here on the Burnettwork. If you want to put your channel, if you want to put your show on the Burnettwork, we can do that. Make some money. We can offer you our subscription base. James Matumbo says Disney responded to Scarlett. Doesn't look like they are backing down. Oh, of course they're not going to back down. Mistake. Anonymous says, oh, wait, hang on. Maybe somebody forgot to say this. Oh. This was Alexander. So Alexander said, Disney's response, there's no merit whatsoever to this filing. The lawsuit is especially sad and is distressing in its callous disregard for the horrific and prolonged global effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Disney has fully complied with Ms. Johansson's contract, and furthermore, the release of Black Widow and Disney Plus with Premier Access has significantly enhanced her ability to earn additional compensation on the top of the $20 million she has received to date. I'm sorry, that's just not true. That is just not true. Kevin sends in a super chat and says, one of two. To film the bank robbery scene in Heat, Michael Mann recorded actual live fire on set to get the effects of gunshots echoing through the streets. The question is, why don't filmmakers do this more often? It is cheaper to use stock sound or something? Yes, Kevin, you answered your own question. First of all, it's very cool. I think one of my favorite... Michael Mann is always after authenticity, and beginning with his first theatrical feature, Thief, in 1981, which is one of my favorite crime movies of all time, the authenticity there is astonishing. The gunfight in Miami Vice, the sound effects are like, what does a gunfight sound like? Very authentic. Same with Heat. Now, you can do that, and I understand where he's coming from, but of course, everyone's got a library of gunshot sounds. But what's really interesting about gunshot sounds, when you put gunshot sounds, like pre-recorded gunshot sounds that might have been recorded on a firing range, they never sound like proper movie gunshot sounds. You know, you listen to some of my favorite gunshot sounds, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Raiders of the Lost Ark, I guess those are Ben Burt designed gunshot sounds. Those are like these rip-roaring, really full, like, cannon-esque gunshot sounds. Totally not real. They don't sound real at all, but they sound fucking awesome. But I think filmmakers don't do that as often is because they don't have to. And I'll tell you something, nowadays, after in the wake of things like what happened to Brandon Lee, I mean, he's going to want to fire blanks on set. I get that. You want to see the reports. Most people don't even use blanks in guns anymore. You know, they add gunfire in post because you have to have certain people. When you have guns on set, there's safety officers, there's all kinds of things happening. So, yeah, it's a lot cheaper and it's a lot easier to do. But remember, they made Heat in the mid-'90s, so that was a long time ago. I don't think Michael Mann would probably do that today. He might. 200 Watt Studio says, she worked for human rights violating supporters of China, Disney. Did she think Disney cares about women or minorities? Laugh out loud. It's not show friends. Well, that's true. I mean, you could say that, but again, it comes down to, really what it comes down to is, what are your contractual obligations? It's show friends, not show business. Or no, it's show business, not show friends. Don't forget that. And I think you don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. She negotiated something. She had a promise, and then Disney changed, to suit them, they changed the conditions of the release of Black Widow. Right there in black and white. And they're trying to spin it as if she's doing something wrong. You know what? Most of the people that have sued Hollywood, whether it was Frank Darabont, whether it was Chris Carter with the X-Files, I mean, whether it was Art Buchwald with Coming to America, those people are usually correct, and they win out in the end, for the most part, because they are being screwed. Because what happens is when you enter into contracts, there's what's called you're acting on reliance. And, you know, the studios are always trying to change. I'll tell you something that's true, by the way. This is true. So let's say you make an indie movie, right? Let's say you make a movie called, I don't know, Free Enterprise. And it gets picked up by a distributor. And that distributor has 10 other movies they're distributing. And let's say they go to the Cannes film market with Free Enterprise. Now, they take their people over there. They stay at the Hotel du Cap. They set up screenings, publicity events, whatever, for the film market. I might have even been there. So they're selling Free Enterprise, right? Well, what happens is, let's say the entire cost of that trip will then be billed against each individual movie. So say it costs $300,000 for the distributors to go to Cannes to promote the film. They will charge each film that $300,000. So they're making back 300,000 times 10, or 11, I guess. Let's make it 10. And a lot of people say, well, that's kind of shady. No, that's business. Because each deal is different. It's not like they made a collective deal with all 10 movies. No, they made a deal with one movie 10 times. And when they go to Cannes to sell it, their fee of going to Cannes was $300,000. That's kind of what studio accounting does. Like, they'll charge overhead for the year for one movie. But if they make 20 movies, they'll charge the same amount of overhead 20 times. And they get away with it because each movie is a different company. It's a whole different thing. But you think, well, Rob, the studios, they're all being made in the same place. Doesn't matter. That's not how business works. And that's why when people get pissed off by, oh, these rich people, they're subverting tax laws and all this. It's not that they're not paying. I mean, some people, I guess, don't pay taxes. But what your people are doing is creative accounting. And for the most part, they have to have it airtight when they're doing creative accounting, because if they get audited, they have to have it work. But, like, nowadays, independent filmmakers, I'm working with a distribution company now at Tango Shalom that other filmmakers, we check them out, are very happy with in terms of their transparency and how much they pay and all that. So I'm really fortunate that we're working with a company that seems to be on it. What a refreshing change of pace. So anyway, but working for you can't expect. Here's my thought about this. It's not necessarily for film companies to through policy to change every injustice in the world. There's injustice everywhere. So I think while I would like the world to be a more just and hospitable place, it's not. Look at all the injustice that happens every day in this country. Why does anybody? It'd be like why does anybody film movies in America? Because half of our African American what's the African American population of prisons in this country? Why don't companies say, you know what, we're not going to film in America until you deal with the incarceration situation in the United States? It just isn't going to happen. That's not how business works. It ain't show friends or show activists. It's show business, and you can affect change, I guess, if you want to. But the fact is, economically, we all have to deal with everybody else. So, it's tough. It's tough. It's tough to deal with. I don't think it's right, but it's tough. Stub McShave says, how big a role do you think Scarlett's reps had with the decision of the lawsuit? They lose lots of money since their compensation is based on their clients' earnings. They'll probably also put down their foot for all their other clients in future movies. Oh, yes, Stubble. They will. You're exactly right. This is much bigger than Scarlett Johansson. This is literally shaping policy for the next 25 years in the motion picture and television business for everyone. And keep in mind, the Writers Guild has been fighting this fight. The Directors Guild has been fighting this fight. Now Scarlett Johansson has been fighting this fight because people aren't getting what they're worth. Salaries have been shrinking. So this is an ongoing battle, and streaming is the great disruptor as far as the entertainment business is concerned. And they have to figure shit out. And Scarlett Johansson is absolutely correct, and Disney is incorrect in this particular situation, in my assessment of it all. Then again, what do I know? Take whatever I say with a grain of salt. I try and bring as learned an opinion as I can. I try and contact people that are much smarter than I am about these situations before I go on and I talk about this stuff, which is what I can bring to the YouTube space that others say YouTubers can't, an industry perspective that I think is unique to me. So, but that doesn't mean I'm infallible or do I know everything. I don't claim to know everything. I'm just trying to bring out the facts and opine on it the way that I sort of know how. David Crabtree says, greetings, Rob. Just a little public service announcement to the Post-Geek Singularity. Fathom Events and Hasbro are bringing the Transformers the movie, the original from 86, to theaters in celebration of the film's 35th anniversary. I guess so. September 26th and 28th. I'm excited. All hail Megatron. Well, for everybody, you got the power. You got the power. You do. If Megatron's coming back to theaters, if Unicron is coming back to theaters, I think that's a great day indeed. Eric Gamp throws out, "We are altering the deal. Pray we don't alter it any further." That's right. Love it. Using one Disney property to opine on another. Eric, you're the man. That is very amusing. I'm amused by that. Let's see what you all have to say. Thomas Bennett writes in. Thomas Bennett says, "Hey, Rob, I just watched your opening remarks about fandom in Midnighter 29. That was actually earlier today. I find your views on Return of the Jedi and Star Wars in general fascinating. My dad was a fanatic Star Wars and Star Trek fan and loved everything created under those banners, so much so that it made me chuckle more than once. I loved episodes 4 through 6. I was annoyed by episodes 1 through 3, although I enjoyed the Yoda lightsaber battles. Was there more than one? I think there was more than one. I'm going to have to watch Star Wars 4 through 6 again to fully appreciate your points about Return of the Jedi. I look forward to it. Thanks for the excuse. I think there's an element you might not be considering in terms of fundamentalist fandom. I think the internet is rewiring our brain and how humans relate to one another." Ooh, I wholeheartedly agree with you there. "In the same way that Machiavelli said it's better to be feared than loved because fear is an emotion more easily controlled. It's easier to get clicks by enraging people rather than being funny or interesting. Add to that, on the internet, you can niche down your fandom as specific as you want. The siloing of opinion and seeing other people as less than human because we're relating to avatars rather than human beings is a huge social problem that we don't grapple with to our hopefully inevitable destruction." You know what? I couldn't agree with you more here. "There's an image I can't get out of my head. I think it comes from the movie Gettysburg. But these men are fighting on a Civil War battlefield, and the Southerner's gun misfires, and the Northern soldier puts his sword up against the Southerner's throat. And the acting is riveting because you can just see the actor's eyes and the plea, 'Please don't kill me. I have a family and they need me.' He drops his gun and raises his hands. And when the Northern soldier takes the sword away from the guy's neck, he gets down on his knees with his hands behind his back. I think somewhere along the line, we've lost a piece of our humanity. Surfing the internet has made us mean and hard-hearted. We forget we are dealing with people on the other end of our platforms. One thing I will say is writers and directors should be careful labeling fandoms toxic. Once you release a story into the world in a very real sense, it isn't yours anymore. The copyright certainly might be, the property certainly is, but storytelling is a community activity. The audience gets to feel about a story however the audience feels, both individually and as a group. And blaming the audience for not responding the way a creator thinks they should is never a good look, no matter how fashionable it may be in certain sectors of Hollywood these days. Conversely, a story can find its true fans long after it's written. Wasn't Moby Dick only popular after it was posthumously reprinted? I could be wrong about that. Anyway, thanks for your shows and these discussions. They're really fun." Well, thank you for that. I really appreciate that, Thomas. Thanks for the kind words. And yeah, I agree with you. The article I was reading last night, maybe it was a stretch, but I found this article about the post-liberal man and the changeover from being see, I've always believed in the sovereignty of the individual. I've always thought that Western civilization, the great strength of our society, is that we prize the individual. We allow the individual to flourish. And what I've seen happening is as we've grown more tribal, especially over the last, 10 years, the thoughts of an individual become less important as the thoughts of the group are. And look, collectivism, communism, Marxism, call it what you want, it will never, ever work as a political ideology. You can have socialist democracies and you can have socialism within systems, but ultimately the individual is what's most important, I believe, when it comes to human beings. Because being an individual, being able to achieve your own thoughts, your own hopes, your own dreams, those are the things that are the greatest things of all. Because collectivism denies people their hopes and their dreams. It forces people to do what the group says. And eventually, we're not wired that way, man. We're not ants. Ultimately, we want our own individual freedoms. We want our own ability to pursue the things to follow our bliss. And collectivism will not allow you to do that. It will take your bliss away. It turns your bliss into the collective whole. And no one wants that, especially now. And I understand. I mean, I get it. I understand the appeal. It's never worked, though. There's never been. Sure, do I believe that we shouldn't have a for-profit healthcare system? I do. I also believe that we shouldn't have a for-profit education system. I personally believe that with a country as wealthy as ours, we should have the best healthcare and the best education system in the world, and we should couch it under national defense. Because a healthy and educated population is the most dangerous kind of population. There is no better standing army than a really well-educated, very healthy army. And people that volunteer to become part of that army, they're unstoppable. And why we don't do that? Why isn't the discussion of education and healthcare in the same discussion that we have a national defense discussion? Why isn't healthcare and education budgeted the same way as military spending? I don't know, but I think it should be. Just my thoughts on that subject, not really what my bill of fare, but hey, it's called Robservations. Sometimes I say things that might be different. Let's see. Who's next? Christopher McCulloch. Ooh, this is a long one. Christopher, who's written in, always a good letter writer. Christopher McCulloch writes in, Mr. Burnett, The Last Jedi, the Snyder Cut, He-Man, the MCU, fandom's often self-gratifying sense of ownership over works of art, which turns into hostility by perceived unauthorized changes to that art, have caused me to consider a few things about our subculture turned hegemony. I've always loved that word. You know where I learned the word hegemony? I learned the word from Starfleet Battles, because it was the Gorn hegemony. And I'm like, what is this word? I was like, hegemony? What? So thank you for using that word in a sentence. Love it. I do not think that comic book movies and their characters have taken the place of religion in our modern times. People who pro-offer this kind of idea, I guess, don't realize how related religion and storytelling are, how easy to conflate. Still, I don't doubt what caste I would belong to were I born to another age. Hierophants were the keepers of the mysteries, artifacts, and their stories. Is it it's Hierophants, right? Hierophants? And it was their responsibility to induct the layman into their appreciation. This ordinary splinter of wood is in fact a piece of the true cross. This bone is in fact the finger of St. Alban. This is the very lighter FDR had for the day of his assassination. As you might know, gold kryptonite will permanently rob Superman of his powers. There's a ring of familiarity between these statements. Comics are our Iliad, our heroic epics, our Vedas and Bibles. Of course, the comparison can't be taken literally, chiefly because we don't read them as literal. A religious text is incontrovertible. The canon is set, whereas for us, it is always in revision. Comics as a medium are almost always defined by the system of revising canon, as can be expected from an industry that coined the term retroactive continuity. The canon is constantly changing as new writers take over a character, try their ideas, and selectively reference those that came before. Often contradictory information can seemingly coexist this way, and comic book readers become well-trained to read comics with this in mind. Comics may have inherited the tropes and motifs of pulps, but as pulps waned, comics waxed, and their longevity twisted the possibilities of a narrative told week to week over decades beyond what had come before. And this position of influence has given it a soft power over every similar example of serialized fiction. Considering how much continuity is the hallmark of the genre, it's important to note that its inclusion was never part of the design. These stories were meant to be disposable, their production cheap. Their lifetime manifest during the Golden Age. They accumulated traits until eventually they developed personalities. Personalities that readers began expecting more from. Years into their runs, the interactions between characters had become rote. Why weren't they changing? Changing like the reader was. My Rhino sends in a super sticker and says, thanks for being you. I don't quite know what all these super stickers mean. I need a super sticker chart, but thank you, my Rhino. I appreciate that. Changing like the reader was. It is here that I believe the seeds of this entitlement are sown. If the characters don't change, the story becomes situational and staid. Change too much, and they lose their essential appeal. And so comics swung between these two poles, the status quo and character growth. People will complain about stories in the moment, but anyone who reads comics long enough sees the wheel turn. What was old is new again, and they're written with this in mind. But another pole has cropped up, at first sporadically, but in recent years, its massive gravity has changed fundamentally the orbit of our niche interest. Films, once a fair-weather friend to the comics world, are now wagging the dog in terms of narrative weight. While comics have a massive influence on pulp culture, this is more by merit of their legacy in the public consciousness and that influence on serialized fiction. The active readership of comics is dwarfed by the consumers of what comes after the printed page, merchandising, television, and film. And with the MCU revolution, it's become more blatant where the creative impulse comes from and where it is directed. The story no longer vacillates between two poles, but around the supernova of the cinematic compliance. The relationship between a fan and his or her fandom is intimate, so there is a fundamental frisson between the source material and its adaptation that, because of this mutable continuity, can make the changes made operate on a very personal level. But the real source of dread comes from when one realizes they now control the canon. What happens in the movies can now be more real than what happens in the source. This was always true going back to 1978, but was once a passing fancy is now a non-stop deluge of content for which the source material has become more and more ancillary. I would agree with you about Man of Steel in this regard. They wanted to tell a different story with Superman, and we should be there for it. What I worry about is if such a story becomes the story of Superman, and that disturbs me. It disturbs me who has that power, and it disturbs me what little pretext is needed for those stewards to use it. Captured Greece has conquered its savage captor. The superhero is ascendant in Hollywood, but in truth, Hollywood now controls the superhero. The Man in the High Castle is a book that deals with this facet of human nature. One of the themes deals with the intersection between history and myth. The world exists as a story we have told to us, supported by their artifacts. People see tokens of the mysterious, the divine, the numinous, creating an industry manufacturing such ephemera. Manufactured ephemera is how I view our pulp culture. We have these stories, modern myths we enjoy being told. We cover ourselves in tokens of these myths, created from whole cloth with no inherent value but what we ascribe. And in a way, it lets us influence the world by empowering that myth. But because we understand their value to be no greater than what we give, and yet have no direct control over them, when they change, we become obsessed with their authenticity, or cynically no longer are able to appreciate them. Myths don't change, but stories do. So we're caught treating these things as both unchanging and changing at the same time. A dissonance that comics have tried to manage, but until recently hasn't needed to exist in film continuity. For the first time, I think, we now live in a world where our film franchises are old enough to need continuity. Star Trek, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, all stories that once had endings are now being continued. Properties are now growing older than their originators. They're moving from the Golden Age to their Bronze Age, navigating from their mythic state to a state of the forever story. And the fan base, old enough to be a part of this transition, is now becoming obsessed with their authenticity, or they're jaded. I think the only way forward for fandom is to treat these works as they were intended, as ephemeral glimpses of a story with an implicit and unchanging myth, with no firm place in time. Otherwise, you fall in the trap of treating them as either inauthentic or as a product of cynicism. None of this sounds truly satisfying, but I haven't found a third way beyond self-delusion. And because I must, you have said that Star Trek is like your religion. This is almost exactly how I've described my relationship with Star Wars. They're the closest things I have to a religious text. For a time, the trilogy, the three that are one, was incontrovertible, and any addition to the Star Wars universe was canon insofar as it didn't contradict those films. As it stands now, the Star Wars canon can resemble a rabbinical discourse. Rabbi Abrams and the Rabbi Johnson's views on predeterminism in the Force were very interesting, but was it not Obi-Wan Kenobi who said that the Force controls your actions only to a point? Star Wars has already run through its period of original myth, but until the sequel movies, I'd never felt them move into the stage forever story. The thought of more stories being told makes me wonder at what cost to the integrity of the franchise they will come. I will live in a world where none of the Star Wars original creators guide it. I think Lucas wanted Lucasfilm to be his legacy, regulating the myth of his canon to preserve the integrity of the stories to come. But Disney wants everything to be canon. So as a fan, whether or not you are in or out could depend on whatever the weakest link is for you, and I'm vexed by it. I wouldn't be surprised if there is a grand Sanhedrin in Lucasfilm's future to try and resolve this. Perhaps there already has been. Will we allow our stories to be finished? Would we allow them to be retold or changed? Do I want that? Christopher, who just needs to dream more effectively. P.S. It's been some time. I won't say I missed the lockdown, but it did give me a few 2 a.m.s to write you with. This letter started out as a preamble to a review of Man of Steel I promised some time ago. I just couldn't find a satisfying place to end it, I guess. Thankfully, the issue of fan entitlement and its ramifications on storytelling are a perennial issue, possibly the issue of this pop culture era. In my experience, the letters that take too long to write are the least disciplined. I couldn't help getting a bit esoteric. I hope I haven't bored you. Well, Christopher, Mr. McCullough, your letters are hardly boring. This is, I think, a fantastically interesting letter, and it addresses what I was talking about last night on the Midnighter about how the liberal man is becoming the post-liberal man. And I think you make a great point that how stories that had an end become the never-ending stories. And it's interesting. I read this article today on Inverse about how Star Trek Strange New Worlds could perhaps save the franchise. Now, it's no secret that I hate modern Star Trek. But here's what's interesting to me. Modern Star Trek, whether you're looking at the Kelvin universe or you're looking at Discovery or Picard or now Strange New Worlds, they've all tried to attach themselves to classic Star Trek canon, meaning Star Trek that was created from 1966 through 2005, the canonical Star Trek. The thing is, like you pointed out, all of that Star Trek had DNA with Gene Roddenberry. The original series, the movies, also with Gene Roddenberry participating in the creation of Next Gen. He was there until 91. So all of the Rick Berman era Star Trek had Gene Roddenberry's DNA in it up until 2005. Since then, there was no DNA of the original creator in Star Trek, but interestingly enough, they've tried to tie modern Star Trek back and make what is clearly non-canonical. There's no canonical attachment at all of modern Star Trek to our classic Star Trek, yet they're still trying to shoehorn and make it work. I think that's a big mistake. And I think, look, if they had just flat out said, I had suggested in a Tumblr post, one of my only Tumblr posts on my Tumblr page, ePlebnista, I suggested the way to redo Star Trek is redo it. Start from scratch. Rebuild it from scratch. And take all the things that you like and tell a new story based on what is it like to be a human today. But they've tried to, what's so odd to me is they keep doubling down on this. We're gonna move away from canon, yet oh no, let's bring the Guardian of Forever into the 32nd century. I mean, why? And you do it so fucking badly, like just ridiculous. It's just it's fantasy land, not science fiction. I don't get it, and that's why I don't like these things. I mean, at least with the Star Wars movies, Mandalorian is trying to fit the Mandalorian era, which is going to Book of Boba Fett and Ahsoka and all that. It's going to try and fit canonically with the original trilogy, which I think is interesting. I mean, I don't even know if George Lucas's prequel trilogy did that, but at least it's existing. They're making an effort to exist in that time and that place. Whereas Force Awakens seemed like it never. I'm like, this doesn't even work in this universe. I hate the sequel trilogy because it feels like everything in Star Wars, like you haven't paid any attention. Hyperspace being one of them. Like, hyperspace is something that exists in space. You know, you can't go into light speed or come out of light speed in the gravity well of a planet that would destroy your ship. You can't do it. And yet, I mean, I like that rule. You know, I thought traveling through hyperspace ain't like dust and crops, boy. But yet, in the modern age, and even the way the Millennium Falcon is flown, when you see Rey fly the Millennium Falcon, I mean, come on, man. Any human being, it's like getting behind the car, even if you're the best driver in the world, every time you get behind someone else's car or a different car than you drive, you have to figure out, like, how do I do this? I mean, Rey becomes an expert pilot of the Millennium Falcon in seconds. And I watch that. I can't buy into that. I'm like, there's no verisimilitude there. But I love this idea that our fandoms are these ongoing stories. I mean, if they would just stop and start things and say, okay, here's a new Star Trek continuity. And we're going to be retelling, we're going to cover the same area of time, but it's going to be a different universe. We're going to look at it a different way. Maybe I wouldn't object to it so much. What I object to is the flagrant disregard of Star Trek. It's like, wait, you're making Star Trek? How come your show doesn't feel at all like Star Trek? It's like, I know you're getting paid and you have contracts and everybody's getting a lot of cheddar. But what a great letter. This is a great letter. I love this letter. There's so many really heady concepts here. And like all the great letters that people send to me, I love this letter. Our friend Paul from Long Beach, writes in. Paul from Long Beach always has something amusing to say. Morning, Rob. I need to start this letter today by apologizing to you, to the mods, and to the rest of the Post-Geek Singularity. It was me who made the trans man, I have the powder quip during the show last week. Of course, I was mocking the entire discussion and meant no harm, but as a professional, I understand that if you do have to explain a joke, it's not funny. Like adults do, I openly apologize to any subscriber of this channel or Post-Geek Singularity member or anyone who is offended by my comments in the chat. Quite a few times recently, I've been asked about how I disrespect fans. My answer is I don't disrespect fans. I openly mock fanatics. Because if there's one thing that the band Felony taught me in 1983, don't be a fanatic. For those that are kind of new around here, I've been making fun of Robert Meyer Burnett about his hate watching of Star Trek for 2.5 years on his own show. Hell, we had a multi-country drinking game based on mocking Thursday Picard rants. I doubt your feelings have been hurt. Have they, Rob? Nope. Takes a lot to hurt my feelings. I mean, if you're a person who has a cultural problem with the haircut of a cartoon character, I would think that opinion says more about you than of the cartoon itself. Cue Tyrion Lannister vomiting. So maybe you can help me out, Rob. For a while now, I've been asking for an intelligent definition of the term fan. The only answers I've received are either monosyllabic sentences sounding like a third-grade level dictionary or the elitist gatekeeper definition that disregards the overwhelming majority of actual viewers of any property. My requirements for the definition: the answer must entail a diverse age range. 1. An 8-year-old, blonde-haired beach kid who spent the summer of 1977 playing baseball and seeing and talking about Star Wars. 2. Any 8-year-old kid who in 1999 was dumbstruck by the size and scale of the film that was available to them with modern technology. They don't believe that George Lucas raped my childhood. And 3. An 8-year-old girl who in 2015 fell in love with BB-8 and now as a teenager sees Rey as a role model. I know it's a difficult question to ponder and perhaps impossible to answer, but can you recall yourself a fan when you openly, and for a profit I must add, say that you hate practically everything? And oh boy, it is incredibly profitable to hate everything, isn't it, Rob? That being said, dear producers of RuPaul's Drag Race, call me. I have a great idea for a multi-episode arc. It'll be controversial and sexy. Wink from Paul. Paul in Long Beach. Great letter, Paul. I think you made a great point. You know, an 8-year-old from 77, an 8-year-old from 1999, and an 8-year-old from 2015. Look, I talk about fandom and fans a lot, but I prefer the term imagination connoisseur because I honestly believe that. I think if you're going to become a fan of a science fiction, fantasy, or horror franchise, video games, comics, whatever, flights of fancy, you know, these are stories that you enjoy that are outside of yourself. They require imagination to be engaged by. And what you want is you want those stories to be good, hence imagination connoisseur. Being a fan of something, look, I think the big problem I see is not, I mean, yes, the fan toxicity is problematic. The anger, but I think our entire society is angry. I don't think it's just fans or fan circles. Everybody seems to be angry over everything these days, and I don't understand it. Being a human being is pretty damn good right now. Probably the best time in human history ever. I mean, not for everybody, but, you know, people talk about, well, Rob, you have white privilege. Look, man, anyone who lives in the West, anyone who grows up in the United States is fucking privileged. You know, we're not, as compared to, say, I don't know, living in India and however much money you make a day. I mean, that's why I don't believe in all that BS about check your privilege. You have the privilege of telling me to check my privilege. We're all privileged in some way, shape, or form. And oh, but you're part of the white patriarchy. Yeah, because we've had it so easy. Being part of the white patriarchy, so easy. Look, we had our gender roles and our biological roles that we had to follow for thousands and thousands, if not tens of thousands of years when we came out of the trees. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here anymore. We would have been eaten. If we didn't have specific gender roles, we would not be here today. You can subvert those gender roles all you want and complain about, but it's not going to help us get any further. It's just what we want is we want to just treat each other, treat our fellow human beings with respect, and hopefully through your actions inspire and allow other people to be able to achieve what it is they want to achieve. Nowadays, everybody's trying to tell everybody else what you've done, what you've done in your past, what you're going to do in your future, who you are, you criminal, you've this, that, and you've... I'm like, who the fuck are you? Shut the fuck up. Don't tell me what I've done or what I haven't done. You don't fucking know me. You know, and history is one big raging fire of a charnel house that's churned everybody up. Do you know how many people have survived history? 0. We're all going to wind up in the same place. Watch Barry fucking Lyndon. Take particular notice of that title card at the end. We're all equal now. So this idea that we're all, you know what, that somehow we're going to right the wrongs of the past. No, you're not. You're never going to right the wrongs of the past. The past already happened. The only thing you can do is try and better the world for the future. That's it. You want to look in the past and you want to blame everybody for your lot in life right now? Forget it. How far back do you want to go? You want to go back to eventually there was only one group. Let's go back to 2001. Let's go back to those poor schnooks who wanted to hold on to that water, and then the people that talked to the fucking monolith. Those people learned, hey, you know what? We're going to have these bones and these poor motherfuckers over here. We're going to go kill them because we were touched by the alien presence of the monolith. Let's go all the way back to that one tribe that was fighting over that one pond. And extraterrestrial influence allowed those people to kill the other people. Let's go back to the oppression of those people. People in Olduvai Gorge, you know, when humans finally, or Homo habilis, or whatever the fuck you want to call it. You want to go back all that? How far back on the oppression scale are you going to go? We need to stop thinking this way. We need to stop worrying about how other people act and how other people behave. We have to stop telling people how you should be. What we should start doing is demanding excellence from people. That's what our society should be demanding. Excellence. Right now, we're dumbing down our civilization. You have to think the way I do or else. Let me tell you about the way you need to be. No, man. You know what? All of us, every single person, should be demanding excellence of our fellow human beings and of ourselves. The world will sort itself out. It will sort itself out. The problem is, being excellent is hard. It's hard. It's hard to do. But you know what? It's rewarding. I have to tell you, King Richard, the new film with Will Smith playing Venus and Serena Williams' father. I think I watched that trailer 10 times yesterday. I was like, I want to live in a world where that guy is everyone's dad. Now, I don't know how he's going to be portrayed. You know, I've always been mindful. I have all the respect in the world for Venus and Serena Williams. They're incredible athletes. But I love the fact that their father, at least in the trailer, the way it's depicted in this movie, he was a guy that's like, you know what? He says to his daughter in the trailer, you represent every young black girl. That's who you represent. So we're going to be fucking excellent, and we're going to do the best we can. And I'm like, isn't that where we want to be as a people? Stop telling everybody else what they should do and what they should believe and all that. Why don't you concentrate on being excellent? And I try. You know, I don't always succeed, but in my own little small way, I try and bring some excellent entertainment to all of you. I try and bring an excellent little movie, you know, whatever I do. I try and be excellent as much as I can. And I think that's the legacy we should all leave to one another. Let's just, and this is not a Bill and Ted thing. But you know what? I mean, if you're going to adopt a philosophy of life, be excellent to each other and to yourself is not a bad way to live. It's a better way than a lot of people are living these days. But anyway, the pursuit of your own excellence, you know what? That's the world I want to live in. Paul, I don't know how I got off on this rant based on your letter, but hey, what can I say? Great letter. Thank you for writing it in. I very much enjoyed it. This one comes from, again, a Thomas Bennett letter. Oh. Well, I'm already in your letter. Hey, Rob, thanks so much for reading my letter on air on episode 726. It bums me out that people throw shade in your direction in regards to tips and such. I mentioned my dad in a previous letter, and he was the alpha geek in my life. We used to have epic discussions about Star Wars and Star Trek, and he would good-naturedly give me crap for not giving the new iterations a try. You and I see more eye to eye on the corporate sci-fi era, but when the sadness gets really heavy and I miss my dad a lot, your streams do dull the sting a bit. So whenever your critics tweak your rage button, try and remember this letter and know that you make the world a kinder, gentler place and easier to bear. There are times when that makes all the difference. Thank you. Well, Thomas, I'm going to get choked up. Thank you for that. You know, I appreciate that. I think that goes back to what I'm trying to say. I mean, you know, sometimes it's funny to me that you can do, this is the 727th episode of this show. I've been on John Campia's show for 3 years now. I probably have 2,000 streams that I've appeared on, probably more than that. If you go to Collider Heroes, maybe 3,000. I've done 3,000 YouTube streams. I don't know. I've never counted them up. But I hope that I've been at least consistent in the kind of person that I am, for the most part. I think if you were to look at what the legacy of such as it is that I've left on YouTube, what you see is what you get. So I appreciate you saying so. I'm glad that worked out for you, or that things. I'm glad that whatever I'm doing here seems to work for you. Matthew writes in. Matthew says, "Dear Mr. Burnett, good morning from Japan. First, I would like to apologize for my first letter to you. I'm afraid my ramblings about my experiences in China were more cathartic than they were formative, and for that, I am sorry. Today, though, I'm writing it to talk about the new Dune trailer and upcoming film. I am a lifelong fan of Dune, having grown up catching Lynch's version every so often on TV and having my mind blown by how cool the sandworms appeared to me. I mean, I was around 4 years old, and that shit was awesome. Anyways, due to that love for the movie and the character Paul, when I was 7 years old, Dune became the first college-level book I read on my own. Wow, wow. Having felt motivated by my mother helping me go through Crichton's Jurassic Park the previous year. I believe I reread Dune at least 3 times that year. Ever since then, I was permanently a lifelong fan. I would revisit the book every once in a while, and when the 2000 Sci-Fi Channel miniseries, before they changed their name to that stupid, horrible waste that is sci-fi, Skiffy sounds much neater than Siffy. But I digress. I was stoked. I was absolutely there for it with a blank VHS on hand to record the miniseries all 3 nights, and I loved it. I must have rewatched those tapes numerous times, shown them to as many friends as I could, and then, of course, reread the original book again as well. Then a few years later, we had Children of Dune, which somehow was even more amazing than the 2000 miniseries, with some incredible performances by James McAvoy, Alec Newman, and Alex Kriga, who is hands down my favorite Jessica. I mean, the way that that woman can shift from a gentle, motherly type to commanding the fucking room in a heartbeat is simply awesome. Of course, then my attitude toward the Lynch film had gotten interesting. I enjoyed some aspects of it, but I had revised my opinion of the film to a seriously flawed but interesting attempt at an adaptation. Now, flash forward to last year. I was, of course, aware that Denis was working on a new Dune adaptation, and I was hopeful for a good one. And in preparation, I bought the new deluxe edition of the novel, which is gorgeous, and went through the earlier adaptations. I also discovered Spice Diver's Dune Alternative Edition Redux. By the way, it's awesome. A fan edit of the Lynch film, taking the theatrical and extended cuts of the film, along with the deleted and alternate scenes, and completely re-edited and restructured Lynch's version into what I have to say is actually a decent adaptation of the book. Still very condensed, but much more enjoyable. For those of you who don't know, I believe it's on YouTube. The Dune Alternative Edition Redux is really good. I strongly recommend you check it out if you haven't. I have. Anyways, around that time, the first trailer dropped, and it looked promising. I guess I should clarify that while I do not consider Denis a bad filmmaker by any means, quite the contrary, I was not the biggest fan of his handling of Blade Runner 2049. It's an amazing film. I own and I enjoy rewatching it on its own merits, but I find it a terrible Blade Runner sequel. If you want, I'll explain why in my next letter. Please do. But this one is already long enough. Let us say that though while I was hopeful for a great adaptation of Dune, I was also cautious. I have no doubt that Denis is a lifelong fan, but that does not necessarily mean his film is going to turn out to be a great adaptation. That said, people who have read the script say it's solid. I'm one of them. I want to trust them, but I'm going to reserve my judgment about the new film until I can see it, and I guarantee I will be in an IMAX screening on opening day. Me too. And of course, and Zephyr Chan both went and saw it in different theaters on the opposite sides of the country, and they both waxed rhapsodic about the film. Now, it's been a few days since the new trailer dropped, and I do believe the film looks amazing, but I'm still wary of how it will fare as an adaptation. To be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of Jason Momoa as Duncan Idaho, which, of course, as you know, as a Dune fan, the Duncan Idaho character becomes very important later on in the series. He's by no means a bad actor, but I'm not sure I can see him capable of pulling off the Roger that would be required of him as we get as far as Messiah or Children. Probably not. And Rebecca Ferguson as Jessica looks far too girl next door to be Jessica for me. I'm sure she's an amazing actress, but the character is supposed to look regal, with Leto noting she had reintroduced the trait into the Atreides line. I just don't think she pulls it off. By the way, sends a diamond super sticker into the chat. Then, of course, there are a couple of moments of dialogue from the trailer that threw me off. Chani describing how beautiful Arrakis is, despite the Fremen's desire to terraform the planet. Spoilers for a book that came out in the 60s. Then there is the line of dialogue featuring Duke Leto declaring that they will bring peace to Arrakis, though nobody knows about the issues the Harkonnens were having with the Fremen on the planet until after the Atreides arrive, due to the Harkonnen carefully hiding that fact from the Emperor. After that, there were also a number of new scenes that I know have been added, and please don't misunderstand me. I know I sound nitpicky, but I'm not saying that any of these things will ruin the film. I simply mean that they give me pause. I'm still hopeful that this will be great, but I choose to remain wary. We've been burned before. What troubles me, though, is that when I try and voice these concerns with other fans, I found myself attacked for bitching about the movie, or generally just being told I'm ignorant because the director, the script, and the cast are all amazing or perfect, which had left me troubled. I am as hopeful for the film as the next guy, but I refuse to just blindly trust. No, I don't think you should. However, it seems that because I choose to remain cautious, it makes me fair game for being ridiculed by other fans in the community, and I honestly have to say that I hate it. What the hell happened to the fan community? Well, social media. We all have a self-aggrandized sense of our own importance because we've curated all the information coming to us from our phones. So in doing so, we've made ourselves the most important people in the universe. So we no longer live outside. We're not looking outside anymore. We're waiting for everything to come in now. It's all coming in. It's all coming in. We're not going out. And that's the problem, I think, with our modern civilization. When did it become okay to start aggressively criticizing people because they dare to disagree with you, or at least have a slightly different opinion? It's odd and frustrating. Hey, I have people come after me all the time on my own channel and Facebook page when I've done nothing but try and be inclusive and provide an environment where everybody has a say. But that's okay. It's odd and frustrating, especially when I've already stated that I'm hopeful for the movie and I'm looking forward to it. But somehow being a Dune fan means I have to be blindly optimistic. I just don't get it. Either way, I will be pre-ordering my tickets, and I look forward to celebrating what could and should be the definitive science fiction film of this year, if not this decade or decade. That comes to us from Matthew. Well, Matthew, a lot of good points there. And look, I would say this. You know, you kind of sound the way I sound about Star Trek. I feel that, you know, if you know the text, you know the canonical texts, and you've read it all, like I've read Dune. You know, as I've said, I've only read the 6 Dune books. Dune, Dune Messiah, Children of Dune, God Emperor of Dune, Heretics of Dune, and Chapter House Dune. I've only read those books. And I was there to read God Emperor, Heretics, and Chapter House when they came out. And it was fascinating where Frank Herbert went with all of that stuff. But I think that, you know, for people that are aware of the books, and as I've said before on this channel, it's strange to me because growing up, certain big science fiction novels like Stranger in a Strange Land, like Dune, like the Foundation trilogy. I mean, to me, you had to read those books. Like you couldn't be a fan of science fiction, fantasy, and horror without reading certain foundational, so to speak, books that were so it was so important. I mean, even like Asimov's the Foundation books were there, but also the Elijah Bailey books, like the Naked Sun or By Jupiter or The Caves of Steel, you know, and of course iRobot. But you had to like read all this stuff because if you didn't, these foundational concepts of like AI and the laws of robotics and all that, like because so much like Star Trek was so informed by literary science fiction that in order to truly grok it all, you had to have read these books. You know, I walked around in junior high school with the pin that said, I grok Spock. If I asked most of the fans, without Googling it, what the word grok means, what does it mean to grok, most people would be like, what? They couldn't tell you where it came from. They certainly couldn't tell you what it meant. I mean, now you can look it up, and it's easy to understand, but you've never heard the word. When I was a kid, when I would go down to the Pike Place Market to go to the comic book store or whatever, there were pins that said, I grok Spock, or I grok, and people don't know what the fuck that is now. But when I was growing up, everybody knew what that was. If you went to a science fiction convention, everybody was wearing a pin. Well, not everybody, but people were wearing a pin. People were wearing pins to say, I grok whatever. Well, that was right out of a very famous science fiction novel. So you couldn't be a fan of science fiction without knowing these things. Now, nobody cares. Nobody even knows what that word means. Nobody's even heard it. Like, I think, especially younger fans, grok? What the fuck? It comes from a book. You mean what, like the Hunger Games? Sorry, Dieter. But, I mean, it's like, and I feel that fans now, fandom believes they know everything because they're all reading at websites. Everybody thinks they know how movies are made, and they'll tell you. And we now live in a world where, because of our black mirrors that we carry around everywhere, we believe that we know everything there is to know, which is not true, because we only know what's coming to us now, like the word grok is not. So you all look it up, GROK. And it's actually a great word. I don't think people would use it now because it's not a grok. Sounds like you threw up in something. That's like what Tyrion Lannister does, and when the critical drinker is like, bleh. maybe you know. So I'll give you an example. I don't think anyone who's worked on Star Trek since 2009 groks what Star Trek is. They do not grok Star Trek. They do not grok Spock either. So. Anyway, I'll leave that up for you. And by the way, when you find out where it comes from, I highly recommend you read that book because it's a very interesting book and it's definitely foundational. Some of it's a little dated, but hey. let's see what you guys are saying. I said I was going to go long, but I don't want to go too long. I don't want to bore all of you to death. My Rhino sends in a super chat. Thank you very much, My Rhino. I appreciate that. House Atreides sends in a super chat. Hi, Robert. I'm a fan of the Black Widow movie. Me too. Love them realizing they're a family. How will the lawsuit affect Scarlett Johansson's career? I don't think that the lawsuit will affect her career in any way, shape, or form, because I think most people realize that this is something that was going to happen. Somebody was going to do it. It's inevitable. And I think that the fact that, look, as far as the Marvel Cinematic Universe is concerned, it was a pretty spectacular flame out. It was not good. And I think it had to happen. I don't think it's going to affect her career. I think that, Disney should have taken care of this. This should not have happened. They should have kept their talent happy, and they should have gone in before they even announced this day and date thing. They should have just taken care of it, and made good. That's due. You make good on things. Look, here's the thing about the entertainment business. The entertainment business, especially people, this is why I love working in production. Great movie productions, great producers, great line producers, they're all about anticipating problems. It's all crisis management. And basically, when you're making a movie, you're moving people and materials to places to accomplish a goal. And you need to be able to prevent any problem. Now, in terms of production problems, there's always something happening on a movie set, something crazy that needs to be surmounted. But like, okay, you're making a period piece. You have to find like where you're going to shoot it. Where are you going to do that? How are you going to do that? Are you going to use stagecraft technology and recreate on the set? Is there places that we can go? Can we go to Scotland and make it look like New York of the 1960s? I guess they can. And they are. So you have to solve problems. Corporate management usually don't come from production. So they don't think like that. They're thinking about contract law. They're thinking about what they need, and they're at the middle of the maelstrom. All they're thinking about is, what am I going to do for my shareholders? Well, I think that this situation, especially they already saw it play out with Wonder Woman 84. That was another thing. I mean, Warner Brothers is like, here you go. I mean, they could have alleviated this, so I don't think it's going to affect her. I don't, because people realize she kind of had to do it. But I hope not. Our friend Zephyr Chan, you know her, you love her. You've seen her on Midnight Metal a couple times. She's seen the IMAX presentation of Dune, and she's getting her PhD. She's studying a part of Buddhism. Zephyr Chan says, what do you think if you're race swapped with Louis Tan on Robservations? What do I think if I'm race swapped? I don't think I would contemplate my white privilege as much. What do I think? I don't know. That's a good question. I think it would be hard for me to say. I mean, I would probably know how to fight more. I mean, Louis Tan is a very handsome guy. He's British, so he'd have a British accent. He's much more handsome than I am. I guess if I was Louis Tan and I was race swapped, I would realize I'd probably walk off this show and I'd go to go lead my best life. I'd go out, and because I mean you could get all kinds of chicks or dudes if that's what you wanted. You could fight. You're a martial artist. I'll tell you one, I wouldn't go back into the Badlands. So that's Louis Tan. I mean, come on. That guy, and he's 6'2". He's a British Chinese guy that's 6'2". I mean, come on. I'd be living a pretty good life. That's what I would say. Richard says, "Hey Rob, dumb anal question." Oh, I was thinking something else. I noticed Axanar and Discovery are both set their prequel Star Trek series in the middle of a full-on Federation Klingon war. But didn't TOS infer that it was more of a Cold War and the Federation and Klingons never had a full-scale war? Yes. Yes, they did. That is true. Isn't it interesting that the Klingon conflict was a part of Discovery early on, by the way? But yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting, considering Prelude to Axanar debuted in 2014. And of course, Prelude to Axanar took a lot of inspiration from the FASA role-playing, or the FASA role-playing game and stuff like that. So yeah, very interesting. But yes, in the original series, they alluded to certain conflicts, and I think border skirmishes are the things they talked about, not a big on full-scale war. So yeah, that's true. We were actually bending or changing canon. So yeah, I mean, Discovery obviously did it differently. Yeah, I've never seen. I don't see Star Trek Discovery as being, in my head canon, it's not canonical at all. Nothing about the show is canonical. Nothing. Not one thing. So, yeah. And on that note, I'm still laughing about, I want to be Lewis 10 now. Thanks a lot for that, Zephyr. Now I'm going to feel inadequate for the rest of my life. I want to thank everyone for being here. I want to thank everybody for generously supporting the channel via Super Chats and tips. I want to thank every letter writer. My God, I got a lot more letters to read. What a great bunch. I mean, I'm telling you, a bumper crop, if you watch Never Let Me Go, a bumper crop of letters. Thank you all for that. I want to thank my moderating staff. I know Louise X. Sparrow is here. Joshua Levesque is here. I don't know who else. I mean, there's probably a lot of people here. I don't know. But I want to thank Louise and Joshua. I'm not sure who else is here because I can't see anymore. But if I missed your name, I apologize. I want to thank all the Blue Wrenches for the work that they do. Tireless work that they do. If you would like to write me a letter, it is free of charge. You can write it to me at the Burnettwork.net website. Now look, all the letters that are pretty good I try and read. That's the ones that Mike sort of edits through them, but you know, I do. A lot of people are just letter writers, so you do hear from. I've noticed criticism, people saying, Rob, you know, you pick people's letters, you read a lot of the same letters all the time. And I'm like, well, yeah, because I read the letters that people write me. I mean, if you've written me a letter you think I've passed over or missed out on, I very well could have. So, you know, hit me back. As always, my Twitter DMs are open. You can always find me on Facebook or find me on Instagram. I never used to look at my Instagram message. I've got like thousands of Instagram messages. I'm like, oh. I would always ever use Instagram and just put up pictures, and I never paid much attention to it beyond that. But that's true. So anyway, I'm going to bring an end to Robservations, episode number 727. I want to thank all of you for being here. It's been a lot of fun. And I know people are like sad about, oh, you know what? Well, I just am discontinuing Midnighter for a while. Because I've been doing doing 10 hours of streams a day. And I need to sleep, man. I need to sleep, and we're still doing Midnight Metal, you know. So I might bring it back. I can always bring it back, and you know, Dave Parker and I did talk about starting the Yub Nub show, and the Yub Nub show is we're going to celebrate the love, and we're going to start the first episode of the Yub Nub show is going to be with Splinter of the Mind's Eye, a book, and a movie, and we're going to talk about it, and we're only going to talk about things that we love. So, the Yub Nub show. Celebrate the love with Dave and Rob. Or Rob and Dave. Maybe it'll be different every week. Because we'll celebrate the love that we have for one another. So, that's going to be a new show. Whining About Movies is going to come back. The Heart of Trek, A Couple's Guide to the Final Frontier. We're still going to do that. All these things are coming. So much to do. So little time. But anyway, I want to thank all of you for everything that you are and will be. And remember, be excellent to each other, right? I mean, isn't that the way to be? All right, then. Have a better day. Oh, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. I'll see you tomorrow on The John Campea Show.